Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you all to this afternoon's licensing subcommittee hearing. I will commence this meeting by reading out the protocol for remote hearings that you should all be familiar with. Can I request that you only speak when invited to do so by the chair? If you wish to speak, please be succinct and raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. Please ensure that your mics are muted when you are not speaking. If referring to any written submissions, please refer to the specific page number in the agenda pack. Any new evidence can only be submitted at the discretion of the chair and the agreement of all parties. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please use the chat function to alert the meeting and we will try to assist you. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the subcommittee. Any persistent disruptive behaviour will result in removal from the meeting. Once the application has been considered, any remaining parties will be asked to log out of the hearing. Please do so promptly so that councillors will have the opportunity to deliberate and make a decision. Each party will be notified of the decision within 5 working days. However, if you contact the licensing service the following day, you will be given a skeleton decision. At this point, I would like to hand over to members and ask them to nominate a chair. Thank you.
Could I nominate Councillor for Janet Thomas, please? Thank you.
I second.
Thanks, colleague. I'm happy to chair tonight's meeting. Welcome again, everyone. I'm Councillor Susan Fajano Thomas. And on this hearing tonight, I've got 2 of my colleagues. Councillor Smith, Councillor Muema, would you like to introduce yourself or wave?
Yes, Sam, off you go.
Thanks. My name is Councillor Sam Moema and I represent Hackney Downs Ward.
Councillor Smith represents Stoke Newington Ward and also I'm licensing chair. Thank you.
Thanks, colleague. And with those 2 colleagues with me tonight, we've got other 3 colleagues who are observers. They're new councillors and just observing tonight's procedures, but they're not on camera. They're listening to what we are doing tonight. Thanks. We've got 2 applications before us tonight, and the first one would be Adam and Eve 155 Homerton High Street, E9. And the second one is Tesco Express, Newton Gate Development, N16. So before I go further, I haven't received any request to depart from normal procedures tonight. But can I call on our legal advisor to introduce herself and go briefly outline the procedures of tonight's hearing? Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda North, and I'm a solicitor assisting members from Legal Services. I'm going to go through the hearing procedure, which should be in your pack. And it may be a blue sheet, but if not, it will say, it will look like this. It says agenda item 4, possibly at the top. And so I'll just go through the procedure that we'll be following this afternoon. Step 1, the appointment of the chair and introductions. That's in the process of being done. Step 2, the licensing officer will outline the report. Step 3, the applicant's case, they will present their case in support of their application. Just to say that the licensing officer has 5 minutes and the applicant's case is also 5 minutes. The responsible authority's case presented by the licensing authority, they'll be invited to set out the reasons for their objections to the application, and they have 5 minutes to do so. Step 5, other persons. That's the local residents, ward members, and any other persons who are in attendance to present their case as to why they're objecting or to the application as contained in their written submissions. The times for this will be discussed shortly, but generally it's 5 minutes for this section. Step 6, discussions. The chair will structure and lead a discussion on the information presented, enabling the subcommittee members to clarify any points raised and ask any questions if necessary. And the time for that section is 15 minutes. Step 7 is closing remarks. The chair will ask the responsible authorities, other persons, and the applicant and the licensing officer if they have any final comments to make. These can only be in relation to the issues raised during the discussion. Those remarks should be brief, and that's 10 minutes for that. Step 8, final clarification. The licensing subcommittee members will have a final opportunity to seek clarification on any points raised, following which the chair will conclude the discussion and the meeting, and that will take 5 minutes. At the end of the meeting, all parties will be asked to leave the meeting, where members can then deliberate and make their decisions, and you'll be notified in due course. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Interject slightly, please, Chair. And can I just confirm that members have no declarations of interest before we proceed?
Yeah, I'm going on
Yes,
there
we should go
just
through that
now,
next bit.
Natalie. I've not received any apology for tonight.
That's right.
And going on to declaration of interest, tonight we've got Councillor Sharon Patrick and Councillor Lynn Troughton registered as other persons. They are our colleagues as councillors, and we also have former councillors Tom Rahili and former councillor Rebecca Renison recorded as other persons. I declare that I know all these people, and I hope same is Sam and Gilbert. You want to come in? Is that the same with us?
Yes.
So
Thanks.
thanks very much. And there is a question before I go on to the step 2 of the procedure from Tom Rahili, whether the 5 minutes in the procedure is per person or the whole of the objectors. The 5 minutes is per person, but what we are hoping for tonight, we've got about 10 people registered to speak to this item. And if we are taking 5 minutes each from everyone, that is taking us over an hour listening to the objectors already. So my suggestion would be, if we are together, or if you are representing, probably the councillors might want to nominate one person, one of the councillors, to speak on behalf of councillors, and other people that are speaking, if they're neighbors, they might want to nominate someone to speak, or rather than us having 5 minutes for 10 each for 10 people. So thanks very much. And on that note, I will move on to the first agenda item, which is the application for Adam and Eve.
Chair, can I just quickly ask, I know that you've quickly mentioned the position on the applicant speaking, but did you want to make any representations or make any comment this time about the other persons and how that will be decided, so that they can consider that whilst they're waiting, how they're going to divide up the representations for other persons?
Okay, that is fine. Yeah, please, can you think about that while the licensing officer is presenting the case? If people can think about how to or divide the time up in terms of speaking. So on that
Chair,
note,
sorry to intervene, Chair, but the other persons are already in breach of the protocol for the meeting, that they've been putting messages to you in the chat box, which isn't the correct way of doing things. So we now obviously need to know what those are, or you may need to refer to them later when considering the representations of the parties. So if we can ask parties not to put messages in the chat box relating to the meeting, because they won't be checked.
Thanks, Amanda. Please, can I ask, feel free to raise your hand either electronic or physical hand, then we'll come to you if you have any questions, and don't put questions in the chat. I've got Councillor Muemma's hand up. Councillor Muemma.
I was simply going to say, I have seen the chat. I think people were just trying to, it's lots of people's first time coming here. So I think they were just all suggesting who was going to speak for which groups. So that can probably be noted, Amanda, and we could probably carry on.
Thanks for that. Please feel free to turn off your camera if you want to quickly phone your neighbor or people you have here with to make that arrangement rather than putting it in the chat. Thank you. So I think we're all clear now. Can I now go on to that item and call on the licensing officer to outline the report? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Licensing Service received an application for a premises license under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for the Adam and Eve 155 Homerton High Street for regulated entertainment, for late night refreshment, and to authorize the supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises as stated within the report. Representation remains from the licensing and other persons. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that. You started very well. And can I say we're going to adhere to timing tonight? Moving on, can I ask the applicant to present their case in support of the application? Thanks, applicant. And can I confirm who is speaking for the applicant? Got Felicity Tulot. Is that Felicity?
It is. Good afternoon.
Okay. Oh, thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here with Stevie Mulgrave from Rose Pubs, who will be able to assist you with the answering of any questions that you might have. We're going to get straight to the point and set out what we're asking you to grant today and why we believe you can do that in a way which upholds the licensing objectives. Firstly, we're asking you to grant a license to replace the existing one, and that's because the existing license is outdated and no longer fit for purpose. And that's for a number of reasons. The plan doesn't accurately reflect the current layout, and the conditions don't address the real issues at play, which is primarily the use of the beer garden and the control of noise from customers using that area. The new license, if you were minded to grant it, would look very similar to the old license in terms of hours. This application isn't a request for later hours. In fact, the new license, if you were minded to grant, would be slightly more modest, as there will no longer be any bank holiday extensions built into it. Those were removed at the request of the police during the consultation process, and so would actually be slightly narrower in its scope in terms of hours. The real change would be seen in the conditions. There are currently 19 conditions in Annex 2 of the existing licence, but the new licence would have over 60. These conditions have met with the approval of the responsible authorities. The police and environmental health enforcement team have felt able to withdraw their objections as a result. The licensing authority are, I understand from my conversation recently with Mr. Tuitt, are also happy with those that have been proposed and are not seeking anything further. And I think it's important to note that, as you can see from your pack, there have been no objections from the environmental protection team on the issue of noise. You'll have read from the objections that it's the use of the external area which is their primary concern. In response to that, a significant amount of work has been done to ensure that customers can use the external space at the pub in a way which does not cause a nuisance to those who live nearby. And that's been achieved, we hope, by way of conditions. For example, a condition which prevents its use entirely after 10 p.m, even for smokers, and that's in line with LP6 of your policy. A condition which bans the use or playing of TVs in that space. There's no music played and no speakers either. And 3 areas have been removed from the plan initially submitted with the application, and these are no longer open to customers. And these changes have already been implemented, notwithstanding the fact that you've yet to make a decision. My clients have also commissioned an acoustic report and implemented its findings. You have a copy of that in front of you. Visits were undertaken by the consultant in February, when I understand David Chewett and his colleague Ashraful Haq from the environmental health team were in attendance. And he visited again, the noise consultant visited again in April and July. And as I say, all of those recommendations have been implemented. Turning, if I may, to the representations, whilst many, as you will have seen, request the application to be refused, we urge you not to do that. If you were to refuse this application, that would mean that my clients would be left to operate under their existing permission, which, as I've said, is no longer fit for purpose. This application is designed to create a more robust and more modern licence. Many of the comments made in the representations relate to an increase in noise experienced by them over the last 2 years. And so I would...
Sorry to interrupt, you've now got less than a minute to go.
Okay, thank you. I'd ask you to consider the application against the backdrop of the operating environment during COVID. Rose Pubs have operated the premises for the last 10 years, but the issues have really come to a head over the last 2. It's been a challenging time for hospitality, and they've not been able to trade normally. So we would ask that you grant the licence in the amended terms and allow it to bed in under normal operating conditions. Ask to grant the licence, grant a licence which has satisfied the responsible authorities. But of course, if you were to grant it, that wouldn't mark the end of matters. A licence is a living document. It contains conditions which require my clients to engage in ongoing dialogue with those who live nearby, amongst which is a requirement to have regular meetings with those residents going forward. And my clients know that there's a whole armoury of enforcement proceedings available to the authorities.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your presentation. At this point, I might want to call on colleagues if they have any point of clarity. And one thing that I would like to ask you, Felicity, you've used the word not fit for purpose twice, and I'm not too sure what exactly you're referring to by those words, fit for purpose.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very old licence. It was one which was inherited by my clients when they acquired the premises nearly 10 years ago. Some of the existing conditions relate to the previous operator, and it was our view that they needed to be updated and made more relevant, modern, and yet brought up to date.
Oh, thank you. Can you give us an example of one of the conditions that you think are outdated on the license?
Yes, one moment, Chair. Whilst I
while you are looking for that, I'll bring my colleagues in. Councillor Muema, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I had questions similar around you saying that the current license is not fit for purpose, and you wanted to move to but you want a new license which is fairly similar. I would like to know what makes a new one fit. And then the other question was a timeline of you commissioning the acoustic report, and when given the history of noise complaints, when you have implemented those things. Have you implemented them prior to making this application? And can you guarantee that you have implemented everything that's in there?
Thank you. If I can try and deal with those in turn, if I may. An example or two of the current conditions on the licence. Condition 9 says to maintain and comply with the Spirit Group's approach to responsible drinking. And condition 16, the premises will comply with the Spirit Group's policy on health and safety. This premises is no longer owned by the Spirit Group. Following discussions with the licensing authority last summer and into the autumn, it was felt that a new licence application would be appropriate. The conditions we felt needed to be amended. the layout also needed to be amended, and so combined felt that it might be neater to deal with it by way of a new licence application rather than a full variation to the existing licence. In terms of time scales and the acoustic report, the application was lodged just before Christmas. We then had a residents' meeting just after Christmas, and having spoken with some of the residents who are in attendance that day, it was felt that that hearing should be adjourned to allow for further discussions to take place and for a noise report to be commissioned. And as I understand it, although Stevie's here who may have further information, those visits were undertaken by the noise specialist in February, April and July. My understanding is that he wanted to assess the noise as the year progressed, as the summer months arrived, and in different sort of weather and trading conditions. But Steve will be able to jump in if I've missed anything out on that.
So just if I can come back on that quickly. So obviously residents have spoken in their feedback about their experience of living next door. And you had that, did you have one meeting with which you called with residents? What did you do subsequently and before this meeting to address some of that?
There have been two meetings that have been held in conjunction with the licensing authority. They were facilitated by David Chewett. One took place in January and another took place in March. And as a result of those two meetings, and as a result of more informal discussions with those who live nearby, various things have been implemented, including those recommendations in the reports. Stevie will be able to confirm that everything recommended has been implemented and carried out already.
Okay.
Yes.
Just really,
Sorry.
I have some questions about LP5 and LP6. Shall I come back?
Can I ask colleagues at this point, all I wanted us to do is to clarify or anything Felicity mentioned in her presentation. Can I ask we leave the questions until the discussion stages of this proceeding? Thanks very much. And in terms of, I did ask Felicity in terms of clarity about conditions that are not fit for purpose. But what you just read out is not the condition, is just the name. So those conditions are valid, but they've got the name of the previous operations. So in that case, it's not about still struggle with the word not fit for purpose. If you are saying because the name of the previous operations are there. Thank you. Can I move to the next stage of this, the procedure? Can I now call on the responsible authorities, the licensing authority, to highlight the reasons for objecting to this application, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this very brief because obviously there's a lot to get through today, but my representation is in today's agenda at Appendix B. You'll see from that upon receipt of the application back in November, I did highlight some issues and some of the background in relation to the discrepancy between the plan attached to the existing license and what the actual premises, how it was physically laid out at present. So as a result of that, we licensing have been receiving some complaints for going back some years now. So we were keen to regularise or at least seek to address some of these issues that are still ongoing at the time. So upon receipt of the application, I did suggest that that application should be refused as it was at the time, and I'll come to that, and it'd probably be best for me to come to that in the discussion stage. The reason for that was some areas around the existing garden extended beyond what's on the current plan up into the boundary walls of the residential premises. So on the basis of that, I did feel like the application, when it was received, should be refused. Since then, there have been some additional conditions agreed, including no use of the garden after 10 p.m, as you've heard, removal of the screens, removal of the TV screens, no music being played in those areas, a specific dispersal policy which is not generic and applies specifically to this premises, smoking and alfresco dining policies, etc. And of course, acoustic report undertaken and works carried out to some of those recommendations of the acoustic report. I'm sure that the residents on this call will speak to their representations, but there are obviously still concerns that noise nuisance, that the pub is still a source of noise nuisance, which, as I say, the residents will speak to today. So I'll leave it there for now. And if it assists the panel this afternoon, I will certainly better zoom in on the plans, the current plan, the current layout attached to the current license, and the proposed layout, which is attached to the new application that's being sought this afternoon. So hopefully that's helpful, but I'll of course wait for the discussion phase so we can go into that a bit further.
Thanks very much for that. Just can I ask if colleagues has any point of clarity with the licensing? No, thanks. Thank you. In that case, we're now going to move to other persons. On here, I've got, like I mentioned, I've got 10 people list. So please come in, Amanda.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. I just wanted to ask whether you would like to ask the licensing authority about any planning issues relating to the premises.
Oh, thanks very much. So I've got that down, but I'm going to probably, this is a good time in terms of asking if there are planning issues around these premises, or is there a planning, or do they have planning to actually operate in particular this external space, to use that external space? Do we know that?
I'm not aware of any planning issues. I know that the operator has begun to install various physical, I think, sound insulation or baffling measures. Whether those need planning permission or not, I'm not aware of. But that my understanding would be the pub, as an long established use, the pub itself wouldn't have any planning issues. But as I say, I'm unclear on any requirements around planning permission to some of the works that might be carried out in the external areas.
Thanks for that. Councillor Muema, you want to come in?
Yes, so I did have a question, clarification about planning under LP5. My question was more that, so there's been a change from a previous footprint to a new footprint or layout. Is that correct? In the garden?
Yes, that's right, yes.
So I think for me, the question about planning was permission sought to do that rather than what's going in now.
As I'm not aware of any
You don't
planning
know.
issues.
Okay, fine. All right, okay. That was, thanks.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Moving on to other persons. I have Councillor Lynn Troughton, Councillor Sharon Patrick, Rowan Perkins. Can I, if people are here, if you just give a shout, and if you've decided that someone would be representing, or can you please indicate? Councillor Lynn Troughton, are you here? Councillor Sharon Patrick, yes, you were here earlier.
Yes, I'm here. I'll be
Okay.
speaking for the councillors. I don't think Councillor Troughton's here, and as far as I'm aware, ex-councillor Renison isn't involved anymore. She's no longer a councillor, and that was her rep as part of the Kings Park Ward Council reps.
Thanks very much. So we're not expecting Councillor Lynn Trotton to speak and not Rebecca Renison. Rowan Perkins, you here? Rowan?
Don't know who that is.
Okay. Tom Rahili, definitely Tom is here.
So,
and Tom, you'll be speaking.
I'm here. I've also agreed with Patricia and Marcia that I'll speak on behalf of certainly a group of Glyn Road residents. Rowan is my other neighbour. He's actually abroad at the moment, so I'll take the liberty of saying I haven't spoken to him, but I'll try and represent Glyn Road on his behalf as well.
That is good. Thanks very much. Catherine Armstrong and Tiffany Okoti.
So they're here, but this is Catherine Armstrong, and I'm Emma Davenport, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the residents of Cell Road.
So we got Emma speaking. So we got Tom Rahili, we got Sharon, and I've got Louis Hunter.
Yeah, that's my neighbour on Cooper Cell Road.
So okay.
Yeah.
Pamela Harvey.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and you'll be speaking?
No, Tom will be speaking on my behalf.
On your behalf. And we got Marcia who submitted videos. Are you going to be speaking?
No, I'm going to allow Tom to collate everything.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that has been very helpful. So tonight we're going to have Councillor Patrick, we're going to have Tom and Emma speaking. Am I right? Thank you. So can I go? So you got 5 minutes each. So going to Councillor Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've been involved in the Adam and Eve since I received complaints from local residents, and that's why I'm involved. I've been in contact with the pubs on behalf of local residents and attended the first meeting of when there was a break in lockdown with the pub, where the residents put their complaints to the pub. All the complaints are about noise from the back garden. A lot of the things in the new application talk about dispersal plans from the front, which is not an issue. The residents live almost at the back of the pub, and all the noise problems issue from an illegal use of what was the bottle store, which has been transformed into the back garden of the pub without either planning permission or it's not on the license. On the license, it's shown as the bottle store, and this is the area that the noise is coming from. There's a new part of the things that the pub is putting forward is that they won't play, that they've agreed not to use TVs and play loud music in the pub, in the garden, and that is something that residents raised, and they have taken that on board. But the noise is from people, and particularly people at the bottle store edge, which is next to residents' homes and gardens, and this is the problem. It's not 10 o'clock at night. It can be any time of the day or night that residents are being disturbed. But also, it's particularly worse when it's hot and sunny and warm, and the pub garden is full. But it can happen during the day. It can happen at night. I know you'll hear from Mr. Rahili, who will talk about how his children are disturbed earlier in the evening and how it affects their bedtime, which is one of the conditions I asked you to think about, which is the licensing act says that we should think about children and harm to children. And I would argue that this pub is actually harming local children by stopping them getting to sleep and at bedtime. Not everybody goes to bed after 10 o'clock, especially not if you're a young child. The pub haven't really contacted residents. They've only contacted residents when they've been pushed. Between the first meeting and the second meeting, it was over a year. They talked about the first meeting about when we asked them what they were going to do about building a wall. When we asked what the wall would do, they couldn't really say, and nothing more came of building the wall in the garden. They did say they were going to get an acoustic report, which they did, but we asked if we could choose the acoustic a person to do the report, so that the person was completely neutral. But the pub went ahead and did its own report. Basically, this pub is causing harm to local residents, and I asked you to refuse the licence because the new licence has come about. The application's come about because the complaints from residents about the illegal use of the beer garden, the bottle area, which was turned into a pub garden area. Before that, this pub was quite happily using the old licence and thought nothing more of the old licence and changed it into a new licence. And so this is new licence is only about the use of the garden, and that's why it's been brought about. And I urge you to reject this application, because it will mean that this area of the pub that's causing residents all the problems will then be licensed and will carry on causing the problems to residents. So I urge you to reject the application, as it's only to license the area that's causing nuisance to local residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Patrick, representing your ward, the resident from Kings Park. And I will now move on to Tom Rahili. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I live as a resident on Glyn Road, where I live with my partner and my 2 children, who are 1 Glyn Road, and urge the committee to reject this application in full. The Adam and Eve is a pub in a highly residential area that's been the source of significant, persistent and unacceptable noise levels. And whilst the front is on Homerton High Street, as Councillor Patrick said, the rear backs directly onto residential properties, both on Coopersale Road and Glyn Road. And it's from that and from the use of the garden that we, on a daily basis, throughout the day and night, experience unacceptable public nuisance and levels of noise. As Councillor Patrick says, this licence really exists because of the use of outdoor space that the pub is not meant to be using at the moment. So the pub talks about the licence not being fit for purpose, but actually on the current licence, and there are areas marked as bottle stores or covered areas, which David Truitt and the council's team had previously told the pub that they were not allowed to use under the licence, and yet they continued to persist to do so. The council was due to review the licence and told the pub that they were going to do so. And it was upon that the pub brought forward this application for a new licence to normalise the use of that space. And it was conspicuous in the absence of the description from the applicant about the real reason for this. This application normalises areas that they have been told they are not allowed to use that they're currently using, which are the real source of noise, significant kind of public disruption. It's not an issue related to COVID, as Councillor Patrick and I think David said. Complaints have been happening for years. I know it has significantly impacted on the mental health of neighbours of mine who are on medication as a result of the noise coming from. It's not an issue relating to TVs. It is about crowd noise. It's about loud crowd noise, jeering, shouting, chanting, all of which happens even when there are actually relatively small numbers of people in the garden. So even if the numbers are reduced, small numbers make huge amounts of noise because it backs directly onto gardens. The pub has obviously put forward the noise report, but as Councillor Patrick said, this is a report commissioned by the pub and for the pub, despite our request to be able to commission it independently. And it doesn't reflect, despite what it says, the average or indeed peak levels of noise experienced by us as residents. There's a reference in the report to knocking on the doors of a resident. It says number 7. Actually, it was number 9 because it was me, to see if they could carry out a measurement from the house. I wasn't able to allow it because they didn't pre-arrange it. It was done. They knocked in the middle of my children's bedtime. And as Councillor Patrick said, my 3-year-old often asks, "What's that noise?" and says it's stopping her getting to sleep. That measurement was made on a cold, rainy, in fact, April evening after dark. So to claim that that represents the peak levels of noise in the pub is completely disingenuous. That noise report does not reflect the levels experienced by residents. Of course, one option is to approve the licence with conditions, but I really urge the committee not to do that. The pub has, I think, repeatedly acted not in good faith. They have taken forward a number of measures since meetings with the residents. None of those have significantly or meaningfully impacted on noise level experienced by us as residents. And there's been repeated promises that things will happen or will be provided with information, none of which have actually really been forthcoming in any meaningful way. And I suppose the fact that actually previously the pub was informed by the council that it should not be using this space, it should not be using the bottle stores, it persisted and continued to do so, gives me real concern that the management of the pub will actually abide by any conditions that are placed on it by the licensing authority. It has demonstrated in the past that it does not do so. And so it does feel to me that the only way in which the committee can meet the obligations around public nuisance and helping us as residents, the primary purpose of these meetings is by rejecting this application and returning to what are the conditions under the existing license, which, as Councillor Patrick said, under previous owners of the pub, I don't think were an issue for us as residents, with a more limited use of the outdoor space, not using the areas that are currently and properly marked as bottle stores and covered areas, not for use as public drinking areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Right on time. Finally, can I call on Emma? Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Emma, and I'm speaking on behalf of 5 households on Coopersale Road, of which 4 of them back onto the pub gardens. And I can see that the applicant wants to grant the license based on the hours applied for, which will currently stay the same, the removal of the non-standard timings, which the police have requested, approving the amended plan and imposing the conditions found within the conditions document. I completely concur with Sharon and Tom. This application should be totally rejected because it is completely disingenuous. And for me, the key part is approving the amended plan. As Tom has said, if it hadn't been for the residents drawing attention to the fact that they were using parts of the premises illegally, basically the pub wouldn't be applying for a review of their license, because what we drew attention to was the fact that they have been using areas illegally. They have been making assumptions that parts of the premises are available for licensed activities, and they are not. And as it stands, the current license is fit for purpose. What they're asking you to do is to basically agree to them extending the license to areas at the back, such as the rear yard, the side garden, and the beer garden, which have now sort of been changed to actually areas where it says no customer access. If that is granted, that basically means that the pub will then have ownership over these areas that are actually critical to ensuring that there is a distinction between the residential area and the licensed area, and it's protected area for both the residents and for the pub itself. The fact that the terminology changes across the different applications, the conditions, is only, it feels like an attempt to bamboozle us and sort of draw attention from the fact that what they are asking you to do is to approve areas that do not belong to them and should not be part of this license application. Yeah, the acoustic report, like Tom said, only one resident has been consulted, as far as I'm aware. We have not been consulted on any of these dates. We've not been contacted by the pub to discuss, you know, their intentions, their conditions. As Sharon said, the only time they've ever got in touch with us was because they've been pushed. It's like before the big, you know, before a panel has been confirmed for a date. Yeah, I urge you not to accept this this application, because it has been 2 years of absolute hell for the residents in terms of addressing the sound issues, our mental health. It's got nothing to do with COVID. COVID was just an opportunity for this pub to exploit, you know, space that they didn't actually have jurisdiction over. Sound levels have been unacceptable for most of this year, as my noise reports will evidence. It is, in our opinion, it is gross negligence if you approve this license application.
Thanks very much, Emma. You used just 4 minutes of your time. That's very good. And I will now move to the discussion stages of this hearing. And the first thing I'll start, I can see Councillor Smith hand went up. Can I have, just to clarify from the applicant or from the licensing authority, pre-2020, this external space, bottle store, beer garden, whatever we're calling it, can I understand that that space was not being used at all? Or if somebody can clarify, in particular the applicant can clarify that, that would be useful. And finally, before as part of what we have tonight, there were 2 videos submitted by Marcia Harvey. Can I confirm that colleagues have seen that and the applicant have seen it as well? Because the video, like Tom mentioned, around crowd noise is about jeering and shouting by crowd rather than music coming from the pub. That's what the video showed us. So good that you've all seen that video. Oh, so who is going to clarify that around the use of this back outer space before I move on to Councillor Smith and Moema?
I can clarify that. Stephen Mulgrave from the pub. Just to clarify on the outdoor space, obviously, and it was mentioned there a couple of times by the neighbours on the difference in the names of the area where customers are allowed. I think one of the neighbours did say in the last 2 years that it's been really noisy and loud from these areas. I think you'll see in the new plan that any area that borders the neighbours now is now being noted as no customer access, and that's what we've been really building towards. And then in doing that as well, there was access there of double doors into this area where there was a barbecue and more seating. We've put, as part of the noise consultant plans for that, we've blocked that up completely. Within then the actual
Sorry, Mr. Mulgrave, all I wanted at this point is whether that outdoor space, the external space, was used prior to 2020.
Very sporadically. We only used it in a more meaningful way in COVID times.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm sure you will still have more questions that you will need to explain what you were telling us. Councillor Smith, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sort of leading on from your question, really. So, you know, one of the big questions for me ultimately is, if the bottle store and the covered yard area, if they were taken out completely and they couldn't use them, you know, what difference would that make? If the rear yard and the beer garden, etc., was taken out, what difference would that make? And I mean, are you saying that you don't want any action out in that outdoor space at all? And then again, back to your point, Chair, just about, it was mentioned limited use in the old license of the outdoor space. It's just to get a little bit more clarification on that, as to how residents felt when that was being used in a limited fashion, how that was working for you. So, you know, do you think that you don't want any stuff happening out there at all? You know, if you took away the areas that Stephen's described, do you think that would help? Thank you.
Chair, I'm
Thanks,
happy.
Councillor Smith. Okay, can I bring Councillor Moema, I'll bring you in a second. I've got, I'm sure residents are planning to respond to that question from Councillor Smith. I've got Tom, Emma, Sharon, answer. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and it's, as you say, to respond to the point from, well, the question from Councillor Smith. So under the existing license, there is a very limited area of space which is marked as a beer garden. Approximately, and this is an approximation, I imagine it's space that holds around 6 or 8 people. From my visits to the pub, I think it's space that has 1 or 2 tables within it. The space under the bottle stores, the covered areas, extends it to many, many more tables than that. I can only speak for myself as a resident. When the use was limited to that much, much smaller beer garden area, i.e. the existing license, if it were properly enforced, I personally have not had a problem. The problem comes from the use of that wider space that is under the existing license is marked as bottle stores and covered areas. The applicant refers to a further outdoor area that was actually on the original application that was put and has been removed from this application that was used during COVID. It is of course welcome that that's been removed from the application, the area that backs very absolutely directly onto residents. Removing that area does not remove the problem. The source of noise is from people using the areas marked as bottle stores and covered areas, and the volume of people you would get in that area under this license application, even with that additional area removed, is the source of significant and unacceptable noise. So therefore, that's why we're saying that this application has to be rejected and to revert to the existing license and the proper enforcement of the existing license, so that the only space available is the very small external area, which, as I say, on very rough estimation is about 2 tables, although I'm sure the pub can comment on that.
Can I just answer on that from the pub's point of view?
I'll call you in a minute. Can I ask residents to be very succinct with their comment, and I'm coming back to you with this question, Mr. Mulgrave, around the bottle store and the smaller garden. Sharon, you want to come in, then Emma?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just pulled up just to clarify the bottle store and its use. I've just pulled up an email which is dated the 4th of May 2021 from David Tuitt to Tom Rahili, which David Tuitt confirms that the area that the pub are using as garden isn't licensed, and he says, please see attached plan. So that's the original plan we have on record. I'm not aware that it has ever been varied, so that doesn't include the bottle store, and investigations are ongoing. So the pub basically incorporated the bottle store into the outdoor space that it uses for customers without a variation to the license, and they were asked to put in a variation to the license to try and make this so they could operate legally, but then they decided to put in the new license to incorporate all the outside areas. So basically the pub know that they've been using this area illegally, and at one stage they were forced to shut down for 7 days by licensing, because they were using the area illegally, and also licensing at one stage were going to serve an order on them and ask for a review of their license, because they were using the bottle store area without permission, and that is the area and the pub garden that's been the area that's been incorporated to the pub garden that is causing residents the problem. It's not about anything else. It's not, you know, as we've heard said, it's not about dispersal policies, music inside the pub. It's just about the area outside and that effect on residents whose houses eject, whose
Thank you,
houses come
Councillor
onto the
Patrick.
garden. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I quickly go to Emma?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just to basically explain that the plans that you're looking at in this application assumes things like, for example, the covered outdoor space. It assumes that planning permission has already been sought for adapting the bottle store to an area to serve customers. That has not taken place. Similarly, the area that says no customer access, which now covers the beer garden, barbecue, side garden, and rear yard, that assumes that that has already been kind of given permission to be used as part of the licensing activities by the pub. It has not been. The current license clearly sets out which parts of the premises they can use, which parts they cannot. They have not upheld their current license. Therefore, this should be rejected because it's based on falsehoods.
Thanks very much, Emma. I think my colleague and myself got the drift. And just to quickly comment that this is the licensing regime. Amanda, our legal officer, will correct me if I'm wrong, is totally different from planning. So we are not going to be discussing anything around planning tonight, and that will planning will not in any way impact on the decision we are making on licensing. Is on to the owner, the applicant, if they don't have planning to use that part of the pub where we're talking about for them to make a planning application, but that is not something we're discussing tonight. And I think it's clear from what we've heard, even from this application, that the main thing we're discussing is around this bottle store turned beer gardens. Can I bring you in, Mr. Mulgrave?
Yeah, absolutely. Just on the covered areas and the bottle store, which have been mentioned there. The bottle store area and the covered areas are the furthest parts away from where the residents are. So when we're clearing this license up, what we did, the no access area is the area which is closest to them. So we put no access for customer use. Since 2014, we've been using the covered area on the existing license, which we regard as a customer space for our beer garden. And we have off sales on our license, so in no way will we be doing anything illegal in any sense on there. And the new application is to tidy up the names of these areas where we use for customer space. Now, anything that is close to the residents and abuts their fences along the side at the left where the barbecue area was, we've completely blocked off. So on this new application with the off sales still, we've just renamed the areas which was covered space, which we have always been using since 2014 with our off sales on the license.
Thanks very much for that clarification. Councillor Muema, thanks for waiting patiently. Over to you, please.
Thanks. Yeah, my questions are around LP5, the planning status, and LP6, the external areas and outdoor events. So having listened to everybody, it does, and I would like to take up David's offer of showing us the plans at some point here, because having read the report and having listened to people, the works that you have done and the noise and so on are about the pub, so closing off so that there's no noise audible from outside from inside the pub. But it does seem like you have an outside space. I'm not clear whether you are currently allowed to use that and whether this is an application actually to regularize that, which is slightly different in the presentation from the report taken as a whole. And I also wonder whether you do have permissions to use all of the spaces that you say you're using, just in light of what Tom has said. If there is a beer garden which is demised to you, and there's a separate space which is not conditioned for you to be able to use it for drinking. I wonder what work you have done to mitigate noise from outside beyond remove the television screens, if the neighbours are saying that all of these issues still stand. That was my first point. So I think just a factual canter through what is and isn't allowed in the outside space, where it is in proximity to people. Because I note here in the report, I don't know who the person is, C10 on page 105. They have there the respondent who they gave us a land, looked like a land registry map with a red line and a bit of land, and there was some very long history there about the space outside, but it was instructive because it does see, I'm not entirely sure that if I'm reading that, if you can clarify, are you allowed to be using the space outside in the way that you are using it up to the boundary? And I know, so with the caveat that Susan has said, sorry, Councillor Fajana Thomas has said that obviously your planning applications is completely separate from licensing, but it doesn't seem like it's a licensed area to start with, or can be used for licensable activity at the moment. So first to Felicity actually, and then Stephen and others on that, just some clarity, and David, if you wouldn't mind, just the facts as you understand them.
Thanks very much, Councillor Muema. Can I ask the licensing officer, Sobain, is it possible to share your screen or bring this or bring that area, the map out for us to see? Are you able to share and what Councillor Muema is talking about, or was it David, if you're able to do that?
I can do that. I have that ready.
Thanks. Yes, thank you, David.
I'll just share my entire screen. So hopefully everyone could see that. This is the existing plan. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is the plan that's attached to the existing license. So this is the plan that we received when the license was created, if you like, converted over from a license that would have been issued by the Magistrates Court. So I think this plan is actually dated September 2003. So if you can see my cursor there, Homerton High Street is here. You enter the pub through this door here, and it leads out to this beer garden, to these areas: beer garden, covered yards, bottle store, and store. And then this plan, so I've rotated this plan to sort of match the plan you were just looking at, but essentially it's the same. So you have this area: beer garden, covered outdoor space, covered outdoor space, and these two areas have furniture in them, so they're set aside now as customer areas. This is the plan that we received when the application was received in November, and it included these areas outside here. So I made a visit to the site, I think it was in May 2020, and these areas were being used by customers. So some furniture had been put out, and various tables, etc., stalls, etc., have been set up along these areas. And my understanding is that the other side of these areas are the residential properties, the gardens, etc. And so as you can imagine, that customers are right up against those areas outside here. The plan was then revised as part of this application to include no customer access to those new areas, but of course we've still got these areas here: covered outdoor space, which on the current plan, the first plan, are still bottle store, covered yard. And as I say, these are now used by customers with furniture outside, etc. So I hope that helps.
That does help. So I've got another clarification then. So
Thanks.
Oh, so in I would like to know what the capacity of the proposed plans is for outside. Some residents have said that at the moment it was about 2. And then the spaces which have been marked as no customer access, will they not be able to be used for licensable activity? Is that what you're proposing? And the other thing as well, which is probably just a general comment, if the so I kind of see back to Susan's point about being fit for purpose, beyond what seems to be kind of you guys, it feels like you haven't been operating within the license in the previous application. And is the not fit for purpose bit is actually just a new application to increase the capacity at the back? And if that increase in capacity, that feels like a very different conversation, because I think the noise mitigations and so on, they don't really seem apparent from the acoustic report if that's what actually is happening as part of this application, not what's happening in the pub, but actually in the external space within your footprint. I mean, I feel like that's my understanding of how things are. So the capacity of the outdoor space, how you propose it would operate, because it does seem like a lot of tables to be backed up to somebody's bedroom with wall, and how we've got to a point where you've been operating outside of the previous license and are then applying for a new license.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Muema. I'll let Stephen come back on those questions, because it seems both I think it was Tom or Emma and Sharon, or I'm not too sure, that said most of the complaints are not around dispersal arrangement or noise coming from the pub, but the problem is with this back area where it's being used. And it's quite, it's something that we need to discuss. Those videos, Amanda, I'm not too sure we got people there, if we're able to show them, actually describe or show exactly what residents are talking about. It wasn't any noise from the pub. It was people that were gathered outside that area. And I'm not too sure in terms of, there is a strong, as you know, one of the licensing objectives is prevention of harm to children. And there was one of the residents that mentioned harming local children in terms of getting that area open, that what is meant. And that was a difficult sentence for me to hear. I'll bring Stephen in to comment, and Felicity would be good to come in as well. Thank you to both of you, so that we're balancing what we're hearing. Thanks.
Thanks. Felicity, do you want me to go first, or do you want to? Just
first, Stevie, sorry, and then I'll jump in afterwards.
Yeah, Councillor, just to answer your questions on first of all, you talked about the no customer access, and you said after this, would there be any licensable activity out there? Absolutely not. As part of this process, that's why we've blocked that off. And as part of the noise consultant comments afterwards, that's where we've done the work to block that off completely, so they can't even access that anymore. It's only people working in the pub can access that through another exit from the kitchen at the back. So no, there'll be no licensable activity there. Your second point, just on the covered areas, and have we been operating outside that in the existing license? No, as I was saying a bit earlier on, it's still called a covered area in the new license. We have always had off sales on our license, so we've always been allowed to have customer use within that, and that area is in the area closest to the neighbours. So we're still continuing to use that within this new license, and then asking why we if we weren't operating within the license, why are we trying to put a new license in with new conditions? We want to coexist with neighbours as well. Like we understand they have had problems from us and from the pub, and most of these did relate to when we used the area which did border their fences. So you know, in this new license, we've got, as Felicity said, I think an extra 60 conditions on there, where we used to not have a cutoff time for the garden. It's the same as the pubs operating hours. We've reduced that to 10 p.m. We've took the TVs out altogether, and I think some of the videos were related from people cheering when football was on. So we've took TVs out completely from the license, and we can't have that within that anymore. So part of this license was to coexist, and that's why we've put that application in, so that we can, you know, move forward and both us operate as a business, and obviously neighbours then be able to live peacefully beside us as well.
Okay, so the covered area, bottle store area,
Yes.
which you are now seeking to regularise through this, was that permitted to be used for licensable activity, not of sales, but for people to stay and drink?
I'll let Felicity jump in there.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we're not seeking to permit any licensable activities outside whatsoever. It's simply the consumption of alcohol there. It's not being sold.
Okay, the point I think I'm steering towards isn't about kind of conduct and management. I'm not really understanding that. Whether people have been using outside for activity that shouldn't have been, knowingly or unknowingly, and it's not a gotcha. It's just helpful to know. Yeah. And my other question was about capacity of the outside space.
Thank you. Just on the first point regarding the use of the space, my clients are certain that they have not been using any space illegally. The application has been lodged in the context of the COVID situation and the relaxation of the off-sales provision under the Business and Planning Act. It's under that provision that off-sales have been provided, as well as it being on the licence itself. I think some of the issues that have arisen over the last couple of years have been because the premises have used areas that they hadn't previously used, and areas that they are no longer using. There's mention of a marquee, for example, because over the last 2 years there have been significant periods of time when the premises has been unable to open inside. It's been forced to open outside because that was the only way to make the premises viable over the tricky months of the last few years. So it's within that context. The application has been lodged following discussions with the licensing authority to regularise the situation and the position and make sure that the plan attached to the licence is the right one.
Okay, so, and I do understand that lots of premises have had issues during and since COVID, but it does also appear that from what people have written that some of these issues have been ongoing and they predate COVID. My question is not about the COVID period. My question is about the use of the space, whether that was, I mean, putting aside the changes around the Coronavirus Act, whether the use of the outside space, whether that was within the licence, and if yes, then I would feel more comfortable. If no, then does that demonstrate that the licensee knowingly used a space that they weren't able to use, which has been to the detriment of the neighbours? And are we then regularising bad behaviour?
We've never sold alcohol in that space, so it's only been for consumptions. And because we have had off sales on the licence, we've been able to have people within that area and have done so since 2014. Okay,
so then there's a wider issue about kind of noise management and mitigation and management of your customers.
Which is where the conditions come in. I know that someone mentioned that there are conditions offered that perhaps don't go to the heart of the issue, but obviously this was a new licence application, and so
of course,
a well-rounded application that dealt with all manner of things.
Okay. So I guess what I'm not disagreeing with you on that. But I suppose what I'm asking is, what conditions have you in place to manage the outside space, not the pub itself? And the numbers of people outside is really, really important. The way in which the outside space is used is really important. Things like distances is really important in the way that the outside space is used, because people's use of space has changed a lot since COVID and probably will remain that way for a long time. But you know, it's
Sorry, I'm being
yeah.
conscious of time.
No, I
We've
know,
got
it's just, I
other
just feel like we're
people's
not
hands
getting
up.
what's
But
happened.
can I ask Felicity and Stephen to respond directly to Councillor Moema? She's asked like 3 times what would be the capacity of this or space or that you wanted included in this application as part of the work of the space to be used by customers. And the other question, which I would like answers to as well, is this point of the where is described as the bottle stores have been used in the last couple of years when it wasn't meant to be used for customers. And that is what we are asking. Are we saying, oh, it's okay for you to be breaching your license or conditions in the last 2 years, but now we're happy to say, or we're granting you that a new application to legitimize your breach of license in the last 2 years? That is the question. If you can go straight to it, that would be useful. Felicity, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, my clients have not been breaching their license over the last couple of years. They've been relying on the off-sales provision, like so many premises have, to allow customers to drink outside. Stevie will address you on the issue of capacity. Yeah, let him do that.
Before you do that, sorry. So, okay, fair enough. COVID.
Sorry, Councillor Moema.
So this is really important because she's a.
Sorry, Councillor Moema, can I bring David in? David, please, can you respond to that? The Felicity just said they've not breached their license in the last 2 years by the use of that space. Is that the situation? Is that the correct?
I've just got to be careful about the use of the word breach, because the Act sets out that the Licensing Act 2003 sets out activity carried on not in accordance with an authorization. So the question of whether or not the activity there is not being carried on in accordance with the authorization, which would be the premises license in this case, is something that a judge would have to answer. So we've not prepared a prosecution case in this particular case. But there is a suggestion from local residents that it's not being carried on in accordance with that authorization. Clearly, there is a discrepancy between how the layout of the premises is at the moment physically and what's shown on the plan, and that's what the applicant is seeking to regularize. That's why I use the word regularize in my representation. So I've got to be very, very careful about suggesting a license is breached when there's no when a judge hasn't made that come to that conclusion.
Thanks very much for that clarity.
Chair,
Sorry, Stephen, you want to come in?
I've got a point of order. Sorry, Chair. Could I ask Mr. Tuitt, and I don't have the license up, whether they're allowed to, whether on their takeaway license, whether customers are allowed to take out drink in open glasses, or whether they have to be in closed containers.
No, they wouldn't be.
The pub, as I understand, the pub are arguing that this area, the bottle store area, wasn't doing licensable activities, but customers who bought alcohol in the pub were using it as a takeaway area. But as I understand it, the customers were sitting there, drinking from glasses rather than closed receptacles. So I would suggest that that's not a takeaway situation. Sorry, perhaps you can confirm.
Okay,
Thanks, Councillor Patrick. Anna.
So, Chair, should I come back in?
Yes, if you can come back in, that would be
so
good. And I'll bring Tom and Emma in as well. Okay,
so just quickly to answer Councillor Patrick's question, the licence authorises off sales of alcohol. So authorises alcohol for consumption off the on the premises and off the premises, and there's no condition at the moment anyway. There's no condition around sealed containers, etc., or a restriction on times that off-sales could take place.
Thanks for that clarification. Tom, do you want to come in? Can I ask just short?
I will keep it brief, Chair. A few points. One is this kind of point about the use of that space and the areas that are now marked as no customer access. It is true that during COVID, those areas were used, and that is when the problem was at its most acute. But the problem has always persisted through the use of the kind of wider space and the use of the bottle stores and areas. And so it is not addressed by removing those areas from the plan. And, you know, it's hard to see from the plans, but those areas amount to a maximum of a couple of meters difference in terms of the distance from residential homes and gardens. So it's not a meaningful difference to remove those from the plans. In terms of this question about whether or not they should be using the space, we as residents, and obviously I'm not saying I completely understand David's position, but it's a legal judgment that a judge would have to make. But we as residents, David, have an email from you saying the council has told the pub that they are not allowed to use the case, and yet they continued. In fact, they have never stopped doing so. So I appreciate the point about a judge would formally have to make that decision, but the council, as far as we were communicated as residents, told the pub they were not to be using this space. We were in discussions, David, about whether or not legal proceedings should be instigated by the council because they were continuing to behave in this particular way. So I appreciate it's a judge's decision, but that's what we were told as residents, and we were told that the pub was informed of that too. Finally, and I say this from a complete lay perspective, this argument about the use of off sales feels particularly peculiar, because if it's the case that a pub can offer drinks wherever it wants on the basis of off sales, then why specify any areas in the license or in the plans? If the pub can always fall back on this argument saying, oh no, those areas aren't covered in the plans, but it's all right, it's off license drinking and we're licensed for that, then one wouldn't need to specify any areas. So it feels a bit of a disingenuous argument to say, oh no, they weren't really allowed to use them, but it's all right because it was doing under our off license use, and it feels another way of wiggling out of it and disingenuous behaviour by the pub.
Thanks very much. And can I briefly bring Emma in? Then I would like to bring this discussion stage to a close. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's just to reiterate that last point that Tom's made, which is that this application and this plan assumes that the pub has jurisdiction over these areas that are off sale, off site, without having acquired any permission to have access to that land, knowing there is the divide between the residential and the commercial property. Yeah, the fact that we're still discussing the bottle store and that the bottle store has been removed from this application and instead been titled the covered outdoor area is an unresolved issue. It shows that, you know, it's not clear what the pub is asking for, both inside and both on-site and off-site.
Thanks very much, Emma, for that. And can I just go to the applicant and just want to ask a couple of questions? And the first one is around this acoustic survey that was done. Though there's the acoustic survey, there was a few recommendations. Just want to understand where you are around that. There were recommendation around mitigation, whether those works are being carried out or not. That is my first question. And the second question, and I will go to this straight away. If we are mindful to approve this application tonight without, or when we made the decision, without the outdoor space, what will be your reaction to that? If you want to take those two questions, and I can see Councillor Smith's hands went up. Now bring Councillor Smith in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of observations and one to David. I mean, when we give a premises,
sorry, Councillor Smith, I want to bring Stephen and Felicity in to answer that, and I'll bring you back in.
Yeah. Sorry, well, the first question was in regards to the acoustic consultant and the recommendations, yes. So yes, just on the acoustic consultant, this wasn't just somebody who he, just picked up and asked to do a report. We worked with Public Protection and David Tuitt, and we met at the pub, and they were aware of the person who was doing that report, who's a very recognised person in the field. And the recommendations that they put forward, we have put in place, which was, the acoustic seals, the sealing up of the wall, which laid out the external extra beer garden, which neighboured the land where the neighbours are. So all these things have now been put in place, and we're also willing to continue to explore and in new ways that we can continue to contain noise within the premises.
Oh, thanks very much. The other thing around the this outdoor space, what would be if we want to approve this, grant this application without the outdoor space? Then I'll bring David and Councillor Smith.
If you granted it with that outdoor space, you're just putting the pub in its knees, really. Like, we obviously want to find a way where we can coexist and run the pub both financially sound for us and coexist with the neighbours, and so they don't get disturbed. There's two ways to do that: is by give us no outdoor space, which puts us on our knees and we won't be able to operate, or let us put this license through with all the conditions on there and bring forward the noise consultants' propositions and put that in place so they don't have nuisance from the pub. I think that's the only way forward for it. One way, both ways get to the same result, but one way really would make the pub suffer, and we wouldn't be able to operate without an outdoor area.
Thanks very much for that. Can I go to David? David, if we, in terms of what we just heard from Stephen, saying that without the outdoor space would be difficult for them as a business. If we are mindful to approve any space to be used outdoor, what sort of condition would you like to see or in that space, David?
Well, I would just say, obviously the financial issues aren't a consideration. It's just the licensing objectives. But in terms of conditions, I don't know. I think Councillor Moema was sort of alluding to a capacity limit on those additional spaces. But again, just with the feedback from the local residents, I'm not sure how helpful that would be, because it, from what we're hearing, it's just the uses of those areas altogether. And I think Mr. Rahili suggested that even when it's a low number of people in those additional areas, there's still a noise issue there. So I don't know. Maybe Mr. Mulgrave can clarify whether there are still measures within the acoustic report that haven't been implemented yet that might still be, and that could go some way to resolving some of the outstanding or the ongoing noise issues. But in terms of conditions, I wouldn't, Chair, be really able to suggest any at this stage.
Thanks very much. I'll bring Councillor Smith in and Councillor Moema. I'm conscious we've now discussed this application for 1.5 hours. I think we've done justice wanting to hear from residents about their concerns. And so Amanda, are you planning to come in before Councillor Smith and Moema?
Yes, sorry, just very quickly to ask. I know that Mr. Tuitt has said he's not proposing any conditions, but if you're still having to consider whether or not to include the outside area, you need to decide within the meeting whether you're going to have the capacity condition or whether you're going to have like condition not to have any drinks in glasses and things like that outside. These are standard conditions, and so those decisions need to be made in the meeting. So thank you, Chair.
Very much. Stephen, I hope you heard that. Councillor Smith, let me bring you in.
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a few questions, but I'm going to keep it short. I mean, in essence, before, Tom, you said that basically during limited use there was 6 to 8 people out there. I wasn't quite clear exactly where that area was on the plan, the one that involves limited use. So that might be good to clarify if that's quick, Chair. If it's not, you know, I can take that. And just an observation about a premises license. I mean, the premises, I presume, would in theory include some outdoor space, David. Is that correct or not? I mean, you know, premises are not just indoors, are they? They sometimes involve bits of outdoor space too. So that's just that point of clarification. And then what was my last thing? Yeah, just in terms of the feasibility study, structural engineers to look at the solid barrier to the top wall to screen properties to the north on Glyn Road. Stephen, has that been done? So there's sort of 3 loose questions there. And the final one is that, you know, what would be a solution for the residents? Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. In fact, you've taken my question. The question I would like to ask resident before I round up. Councillor Muema.
Yeah. So I just want it noted, I'm not really sure that anyone's answered what the capacity of the outside space that is being applied for is. Because if we're going to have a sensible conversation about it, we need to have a baseline level of information. And from that comes mitigations and ways in which the applicant might be able to offer some ways to resolve some of the noise issues which residents are concerned will continue under a new license. But at the moment, I don't know whether is it 10, is it 100? I have no idea right now. I feel like I'm being made to seem difficult. It's just helpful basic bit of information to know how many people in the new space are you expecting? Are we having vertical drinking? Are people seated? Are people just going out for a cheeky cigarette? All those sorts of things. It's not clear.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks very much. Over to you, Stephen and Felicity.
Yeah, for the outdoor space, obviously there's never been a capacity limit on the old license, and a lot of new licenses for beer gardens don't put it on there. But absolutely,
So I'm asking you though at the start of this subcommittee, what is it that you are seeking here as part of this application?
Absolutely. So we're guided by our fire risk assessment. Obviously, that's the way we do outdoor areas, which is 120 for the outdoor area. We operate it mainly as a seated outdoor space. So ask customers to sit and when they're out there. So as I said, we're guided by the FRA, which is done for the pub.
Sorry, Stephen, can I ask a direct question? What is the capacity of these outdoor spaces, or are you just hoping that it's as many people as possible that will be using it? Can you please give us a number? Oh, we're hoping 20 people will be there, 50 people will be there. I would like to hear you say that to us at this meeting. Thank you.
Absolutely, maybe you didn't hear. I did give it a number of the capacity, and it was from the fire risk assessment done for the pub, which is 120 people.
Yeah,
and that's outdoors, yeah.
Outdoors area, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I come back?
Okay, do you want to deal with the other questions, Stephen and Felicity from Councillor Smith? I'm afraid I'm only going to be coming back to residents in terms of rounding up. I think we've heard from everyone. I think we've had justice in terms of discussion tonight.
Yeah, I think one was about the acoustic fencing. Was that correct? Yeah, that has been completed. And just on the acoustic visits, and there wasn't just one visit on a cold night. We've done visits right up until 2 weeks ago, which are in the report, which is one of the hottest weeks of the year. So that's been covered within that acoustic report. If you have a look at that, and the levels then were submitted before we done any of the works and afterwards. So they're all within that report as well. And sorry, can you just remind me what the other question was?
There was a question around when it was used for limited usage, what the area was, because Tom said it was between 6 or 8 people. I just kind of want to know, where that is, and if residents think that they could work with that if it was enforced.
it was called, some areas were called covered areas, some areas were called beer garden. That's a tiny little area at the back step. No, it couldn't really use for as a customer space. You know, that our area was with the covered area and beer garden in the old plan, and that's why we've changed the naming on that on the new one. There wasn't a capacity level set for that beforehand on the old license.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for your contribution. Can I now go back to David? If you have any other things to say, then I'll go back to residents around final words before I close this discussion. Thanks.
I've got nothing to say at this point, Chair. Thank you.
The other thing that I want to ask Stephen before I go to Sharon, Emma, and Tom, there's been a conflicting view around the consultation with residents. Residents are saying that following last year meeting, that they were promised a sort of consultation or the engagement with residents, but they didn't hear anything back from the pub in terms of engaging with local residents around this application and the operation in general, and want you to comment on that. And following your comment, I'll go to residents to ask them what would be, in terms of their concern as local residents, what would be the outcome they would want to see. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, in the consultation, we actually absolutely have, you know, maybe not in the COVID times when it was bad, but since then I'm putting in the application. We've invited residents to online meetings. We've also tried to, as part of the noise consultation and getting the readings, to get access to the premises as well. I've tried that on numerous occasions, and try to work with the residents on that because we want the most accurate readings for it. We were able to get access to one of the neighbours who won't be named, but yeah, we've tried to do that, and as part of the new license, it will be about continuing to talk to the neighbours as well, and inviting them for meetings and continuing to keep the dialogue open. We just don't think we can get a license and that's it. We understand that if problems arise, it's going to come back to us, and that's why we're trying to get a license here, which is good both for the pub and both for the residents.
Thanks very much. Councillor Smith, Councillor Moema, any last clarification from you?
Yeah, just a very quick one. In terms of the conditions that were mentioned in the acoustic report, confirmation rear garden area nearest to residential on Glyn Road is not to be used. That one. Courtyard area to be closed, 2200 hours. Front footway area, Homerton High Street to be used after 2200 for those ones. And then TV screens, they're all in there, yeah?
Yeah, all in place.
Oh, brilliant, thank you.
Thanks. Is that okay, Councillor Smith? Are you happy with that? Yes. Councillor Moema?
Mine is not a clarification. It's more of a confirmation of where we're at, which is that the application is, as you have outlined, for the capacity in the rear for 120. Is that what going into decision making with?
Yeah. Sorry, Stephen, go on.
I'm sorry, yes, if you're asking for a clarification on the number for the beer garden, that's correct.
And there will be drinking glasses in this area as well?
There will
Stephen?
there will be consumption of alcohol, correct?
Alcohol
but
in this.
There won't be the sale of alcohol in the area.
But can I just I don't want to labour the point. There isn't really much in the application about how you're going to manage all of that. That's a hell of a lot of people. In anywhere in Hackney, that's a lot of people. And
Councillor, may I interject?
Sorry, Tom, you want to come in? You want to, Amanda, you want to come in?
Yes, Chair. Just a reminder, Chair, to ask the applicant about whether the monitoring system has been approved by the Environmental Protection Team, and also they need to approve it to ensure there isn't any disturbance to the outside area. So I don't know if you want to check that, whether the conditions have included that factor.
Oh, Felicity, would you like to come in and answer those questions, whether that has been the monitoring, that has been approved, or would that be you, Felicity?
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I'm not sure at the moment. Steve, I don't know if you know the answer. The acoustic report was carried out in conjunction with the environmental protection team, who obviously haven't lodged a representation. But obviously the licence is yet to be granted, and so reference, I think, to that condition regarding liaison with them. I don't know if that's taken place yet.
We worked with them before completing the works, but as you say, the license hasn't now been accepted yet, so we will be working with them on that.
So, like we said, has that been approved by them? David or Subine, do you know what the answer? We haven't got an environmental protection officer here with us. So again, I don't know the definition of working with them, because you've got an independent acoustic or company that have done this. So working with the environmental protection team, I'm not too sure what that means.
So we did set up a meeting with them, with our noise consultant and with public protection at the pub, and outlined the works that we were going to proceed with, which they agreed with, and now we've completed them works.
Complete the work that were recommended, not in terms of the acoustic survey. Am I getting that right?
What was recommended by public protection as well? They put stuff within that. Yeah, correct.
Thank you. Amanda, is that what you need me to clarify with the applicant?
Yes, that should be fine. And then what about any capacity condition? Are we considering that or not?
No, I think he's Councillor Moema, Councillor Smith, what do you want to say? If we are mindful to grant
risk assessment, is there a fire risk assessment?
Yeah, Stephen is mentioning that with the fire, I think that is how they got the number. Am I right, Stephen?
That's correct. That's from fire risk assessment.
Yes.
Well, Chair, I totally agree with Councillor Moema that 120 it just seems a lot for that space. I've been there. You know, I mean, even 40 in my mind is quite a lot out there, to be frank. I couldn't imagine ever seeing 120 out there. It'd be horrendous. So that's where I stand. So I'm putting out a figure of 40.
My only point that I wanted to raise was, I have also been a very long time ago to your premises. I feel, given that the issue is for the outside space, 120 is mad, but there is insufficient information in this application to make anything meaningful about how to manage that space, is where I'm at. I don't think it's been meaningfully addressed in the application itself. And I feel also I've had to drag out the number 120 by asking 4 times. And yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Moema. I know David wants to come in, and I put this to Stephen. If we are mindful to grant the application, Councillor Smith just suggested a capacity of 40 outdoor, 40 people outdoor at any given time. Would that be acceptable to you?
As a business, no, we couldn't operate with 40 people out the back. As I said, it's a safe space. It's done through fire risk assessment, and that's where we've got that number from. And you know, we look at seating space only as well, just so the exits are clear, and it is a completely safe space for that out there. So you know, we'd look at seating area only for the beer garden as part of the restrictions, but we wouldn't be able to operate as a business with just a 40 capacity garden out back.
Thanks very much. We are looking at your license. It is good that we want businesses to succeed, but at this point in time, we're not looking at the financial stages of without licensing or material. But what I want to say is that, as Councillor Moema have said, you were saying to us you want 120 people to be at this space, this external space, and with the application we haven't received any operational management of those, of the 120 people that will be outside of this space. And I don't think that is good enough. We would, if that was what you were planning, and that was not even mentioned in the application at all. So I'm going to bring this to an end, and I hope both yourselves as the applicant and the objectors feel heard. But before I do that, 30 seconds each, can I call the objectors from Councillor Patrick, then Tom and Emma to come in? Thank you. 30 seconds each.
Okay, Chair. I'm asking the committee to reject this application on licensing grounds. This pub has existed for over 300 years without using this space. They say they can't make money without it, but that's not the licensing objectives, and that's not what you're here. Sorry, I'm so used to sitting there to judge. We heard about public nuisance, and can you imagine 120 people in that outside area? It would make my residents' life absolute living hell with 120 people, and they've been disingenuous about why they've applied for this license, how many people they've had in that area outside, why they're using it, and use things like there's no licensing activities taking place there, when they just mean they haven't sold the beer there. The beer and the alcohol can be sold inside the pub, and people have brought it out, and they're saying it's takeaway. Okay, well, this pub doesn't have a thing on it saying that you can't take glasses out. But I think this is weasel words for an application. It's a weasel application. I ask you to reject it, and hopefully then the pub could come back and work with residents in a meaningful way and see if we can all agree on a plan for the outdoor space, and then the applicant can come back.
Thanks,
to the new
Councillor
license.
Patrick. Thank you. Can I go to Tom, please?
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with Councillor Patrick that this application should be rejected on the basis of what we've heard today in the application. 2 points. I think it's really telling that the pub say they have implemented the recommendations in the noise report, because I've seen some of those changes. They have made no material difference to the noise experienced by us, by residents, so they're clearly not enough to happen. I think it was Councillor Smythe who suggested a number of 40. Even 40 would create an unbearable level of noise, and as it's been said repeatedly by yourself, of this committee. So really urge the committee to reject it on the basis of the noise and the nuisance created.
Thank you. Emma, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to reiterate that I would ask this committee to reject this application, and that's based on the fact that the current license is fit for purpose. It covers an outdoor area that they currently have, which they have failed to manage properly. They could work on that with their current license, then that would be a start to looking towards building a better bridge between the residents and this business.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks. Say thank you to Stephen, Felicity, to David, and every other resident that present tonight. Felicity, you want to come in?
Sorry, may I sum up just briefly for 30 seconds?
I did ask that previously. Probably that's okay.
Sorry, Chair, just very, very briefly. Just want to bring it back to what's before you, which isn't a review of the existing licence, but the grant of a new one. We believe that this licence is better than the existing one. It's more robust. It compels ongoing dialogue between the parties. As I said, it's a living document. We've tried to be responsive to the concerns raised and address them and try to find a way through. It's a licence which the responsible authorities are happy with, and we'd like you to grant it, to give it time to bed in under normal trading conditions, with my clients obviously in the knowledge that if any issues were to arise, they'd be right back before you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Felicity. Thanks, Stephen. You know,
Yeah,
do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Just as Felicity said, we want to coexist and don't want to go back to that old license, which didn't have conditions on there to what time we can use the beer garden to, what if we can use TVs out there. We don't want to do that. And we don't want to go back to that license. We want to use a new license with the new conditions on there, and with the reduced noise within that beer garden, and to be able to coexist with the neighbours and move forward. So that's why we'd ask you to grant the new application.
Thanks very much. And I think both sides felt listening to, we've spent nearly deliberately given people the opportunity to come in and discuss this at length so that we know exactly what we are doing. So thanks very much for your contributions to this. I'm hoping in the next 3 working days, 5 working days, we hear from the licensing or officers in regards to our decisions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all.
Colonel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I now move swiftly to the second application? That is the Tesco application. Do we have sorry, just waiting for people who are leaving the meeting to leave. Right, now going to second application, the Tesco Express 48 Matthias Road, N16. Going straight to call on the principal licensing officer to outline the officer's report. Over to you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Chair. So the item we are considering for this evening, the second item is for the premises license under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for Tesco Express 48 Matthias Road for late night refreshment and to authorize the supply of alcohol for off sales as stated within the report. Environmental enforcement has withdrawn their representation based on agreed conditions with the applicant. So the only representation remains is from Environmental Protections and other persons. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Can I'm not too sure who is speaking on behalf of the applicants. I've got 3 names. I've got Jeremy Bach, I've got Hadjish Teremba, and I've got Lee Covenant. So who is speaking? Who is going to be, who is the applicant? Who is?
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Jeremy Bark. I'm from BCLP. I will be predominantly speaking on behalf of Tesco. But before I do that, there are a couple of points of clarification that I just wanted to deal with your indulgence.
Sorry, the point of clarification would be within your 5 minutes. If you present your application, there will be a discussion stage where you can clarify anything. So
I think one of the points of clarification was actually we had made a request for 10 minutes rather than 5 minutes, given that
I think the licensing officer responded to that. I saw that email, which I think make that very clear.
It said that it would be the first point of discussion at the hearing, Chair, with respect. So, and what we effectively said was that it would probably be helpful if we had 10 minutes rather than 5.
Mr. Barr, can I say we've got 5 minutes to present your application? There will be a discussion stage where you'll be able to or make point of clarification or bring any other issues that you might want to bring in. Thank you.
I'm grateful. Well, I will crack straight on.
Sorry, if I may interrupt, sorry. I don't know if you guys can hear me, and apologies.
Sorry, who is this?
This is Stanislas, and I'm a member of the Wolverine House Association. And just before we were going ahead, I just wanted to point out that we were given a 2-hour slot for this particular meeting, and some of us have a work obligation and parenting obligation, and we just, some of us had to leave as well. So I don't think we're going to be able to continue this session. We're given a 2-hour slot, and we met that slot, but from a timing perspective, we would like to reschedule the hearing because we basically lost a few people. Some of us have to pick up our kids at the nursery, and we just.
Thanks very much for that suggestion, but I'm afraid I cannot adjourn this hearing. Like you said, you got other people. If you want to, I don't know who's on here. I've got like 20 people are meant to be speaking. So my advice would be if you can come together and nominate people who will be speaking on your behalf. But I'm afraid I cannot adjourn this. I cannot. Sorry, please, can you listen to me and stop interrupting? I'm afraid I cannot reschedule this hearing. And I'm sure when you receive the information from the governance services, the administrator will make it clear that depending on our agenda, people we give people the opportunity or the previous application unfortunately is gone long. So my suggestion would be, if you want to go and arrange and nominate people who will be speaking on your behalf, that would be the best thing to do. Sorry, I'm going to move forward with this. Amanda, sorry, Amanda.
Yes, Chair.
Would you like to say something about this, please? Thank you. I've just said today.
Sorry, the phone rang. Could you just repeat the question?
I've just said to the objectors, I'm afraid one of the objectors raised the fact that some of them cannot stay for this hearing, asking for rescheduling of this. I've said to them
we can't reschedule the hearing because
we cannot reschedule.
The hearing before took longer. You know, the expectation is that it will happen at some point this afternoon. From the start of the meeting starts from 2 o'clock and will go on till the end of the day. So unfortunately, we can't reschedule it. We have their representations. All we can do is ask for any parties who are still present to add any points that they want to make on their behalf. But unfortunately, it's too late to reschedule it.
Thanks very much. So just for people to know, Amanda North, she's our solicitor and legal advisor on this. That's why I just called her to give guidance. And to the gentleman who raised rescheduling, I think you've heard that. So I'm bearing in mind that we got the other party here as well. So we cannot reschedule. We've got a number of people here that can represent you. And as our legal officers mentioned, we've got all your submissions and we've read them. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Barr, can I start your 5-minute presentation now? Thank you.
I'm very grateful. So this is an application by Tesco Express for its smallest form of convenience store. There has been some discussion between Tesco and the residents, and therefore the first thing we want to do is slightly amend the application to reduce the hours from 6 a.m. in the morning till 11 p.m. That's on the back of those discussions and looking at the representations. That may make some of them happy. Some of them, I'm sure, will still have issues, but then removes late night refreshment. This is the smallest format that Tesco operate. It is effectively aimed at those living or working in the area. It doesn't draw people in, and that's why there are so many of them. We have a good neighbour policy, which I can explain to you in the discussion. We like to think we're an excellent operator, and in many cases, we implement best practice. Very quickly in the time, because there isn't much, and we were told that the consideration would be given to 10 minutes. The scheme of the Act is to be permissive. This is not in a stress area, and therefore in line with government guidance and in line with case law, you'll find from 9.42 onwards, there has to be good reason for that read good evidence under the licensing objectives to restrict. And again, I can address you more on that. The hours that we selected are on the basis of the government guidance in terms of opening hours, particularly matching hours for alcohol for supermarkets. And on the back of the discussions with some of the statutory authorities and lack of objections from them, we thought that that was appropriate. In terms of our policies, we were the first company to introduce Think 21 and Think 25 in this sector. I can tell you more about that if you need it. We do extensive auditing by way of mystery shopping, and also in terms of the stores on a quarterly basis. I can tell you more about that in the discussion. Our training is extensive. Everybody gets induction training. Everybody gets refresher training twice a year. It's still the only training in the off-licence sector to have won the British Institute of Innkeeping Good Practice Recognition Scheme Award. So it's validated externally. We have lots of detailed responsible retailing of alcohol policies, which again I can tell you about, including a you say no, we say no policy. What we do is we empower all members of staff to refuse any sale of alcohol where they have any concern whatsoever. In terms of some of the other things we have extensive CCTV. There are conditions that you will find in the application papers and your committee papers reflecting that, drawn from the operating schedules. There are fixed cameras always on the entrance, on the tills, and on the alcohol displays. In terms of alcohol, it is a small but limited part of the offer. So typically alcohol sales in a Tesco Express that has a licence account for somewhere between 5 and 12%, depending on the profile. There are no more than a maximum of 120 alcohol products. The majority is red and white wine, out of a total number of products of about 5,000 in the store. And again, the total amount of alcohol on display is very limited compared to sales of other goods. Spirits are always kept behind the counter unless they are pre-mixed. In terms of litter, we've got 2 bins outside the store. We do cleaning on a daily basis. In terms of deliveries, there is full planning permission for this particular store and this application. And again, what has to be taken with care is that, in essence, while we were applying for a premises license, the overwhelming majority of what we do is nothing to do with licensing. So 95 to 90% of it is just an ordinary convenience store for which we already have permission. Planning permission deals with deliveries. It limits them between 7 AM and 7 PM. We've carried out a delivery risk assessment, and the deliveries will take place from Cowper Road, go through the main entrance of the premises, and be dealt with in a very sensible, safe, and low-profile way. We have very few refuse collections from the store because we recycle all the waste, about 99% of it, back on the cages, going back on the delivery vehicle that comes in. So again, we manage that. If you wanted a condition that was relevant to licensing, we always incorporate the deliveries of alcohol into other goods. There's no additional impact, and we would be happy for you to impose that. In terms of antisocial behaviour, we simply don't tolerate it within our stores. If people behave badly, we ask them to stop. If they won't stop, we ask them to leave, and we'll get the police involved or ban them if we need to. We carry out security guard risk assessments and general security risk assessments for our stores, even though this store is not due to open until late September.
Thanks, please. Can you round up, please?
I'll be super quick if I can finish though. So in terms of that assessment, we have identified that there will be a security guard operated 40 hours per week within this particular store, which is linked to the very high staffing levels that we have. Very final point though, I think Natalie Williams may wish to speak, because she said the first thing she would have raised with you was our request to speak for 10 minutes, which we were told would be considered and hadn't been considered before, and clearly hasn't been. I raised a point of order under equality under the hearing regulations 2005, that the parties should be afforded an equal amount of time. I've clearly got a lot more to say. I'll deal with it in the discussions, but I did want to make that point that we were promised that this would be the first point of order that would be raised before you. Clearly, Natalie wasn't available. She's just rejoined. I sent a separate email to your solicitor to make sure that happened, and clearly it hasn't. So, but you've said that my time is up. So
thank you, Mr. Bach. I'm not too sure what you were getting at. At the beginning, I did make it clear to you that your email was, or your request was conveyed, but I did mention to you that we are limiting the time to 5 minutes. So that is the consideration. It was made clear to you in the response that the granting of 10 minutes will be at the discretion of the chair. And I'm the chair, and I said the time will not be extended, will be 5 minutes. So does that clear it again?
I understand what you're saying now, but I think at the outset, it always seemed to be suggested, or the way that I took it, was that that's already been dealt with and you will only be getting 5 minutes. So I may have taken that the wrong way.
Yeah.
Separate, fully accept that. But I'm just saying, under the hearing regs, if you look at that, the parties are supposed to be afforded a maximum equal time. I understand that there are 3 residents that will speak for 15 minutes. I can pick up some of these points in clarification, but I suspect if you want clarity about what we're doing and why we're doing it, that's why we ask for 10 minutes.
Mr. Bag, we're going to get to
hear what you've said.
We're going to get to the discussion stages where we have the opportunity, both myself and my colleagues, we have the opportunity to ask you questions. And at this point, can I go to colleagues, Councillor Smith or Councillor Muema? Do you have any point of clarification to Mr. Bach at this stage at all?
Well, it's not really clarification, but I mean, I do feel that your offer of reducing your hours to 11 comes more within our sort of LP4 policy, which goes from 8 until 11. And I would just ask you, whilst you're hearing things, to maybe consider doing that for the alcohol sales in particular. That would certainly give me a little bit more confidence. Thank you.
So again, apologies, because I was probably trying to speak very quickly to get everything in. So in terms of the reduction, it's the reduction of the sale of the hours for the sale of alcohol. So it's from 6 in the morning till 11 p.m. So clearly we have a statement of licensing policy, and as you say, LP4, which is off sales. It means it's now consistent with those hours in the evening, because LP4, as you full well know, ceases at 11 p.m. It's obviously not a binding requirement, it's a policy, and therefore you still treat each application with merits, as you full well know. Clearly, if you were to look at the Secretary of State's guidance under section 102 at paragraph 10.15, that states that supermarkets, convenience stores and similar stores, unless there is good reason, should normally be granted hours in line with their opening hours. So that's why we haven't amended from 6 in the morning. And again, I can address you about the percentage of sales and stores that have got things in the discussion, but the predominant reason.
Thanks, Mr. Bach. That is just the clarification we need at this point. I'll bring you in
just want to explain that
at a later stage. Mr. Bach, I'll bring in at a later stage. My colleagues want that clarification, and we've got it. Thanks for your for that. I'll move into the next stage and calling the responsible authority, the environmental enforcement, to present their representation in objecting to this application. I've got JC Fruin here. Oh, Suban, you want to come?
They've withdrawn their representation, I believe.
That's correct.
They've withdrawn their representation, and the licensing authority would be the next, I think.
No, sorry, that's not licensing authority.
The environmental protection. So can I call on the environmental protection officer to present the objection to this application? Which officer do we got? Adeshola, where is he? here?
No, Chair. Looks like the Environmental Protection Officer is not around.
So why are they not here? Are they not meant to be?
Yes, Chair. They are meant to be here, but
It's Natalie. Can Natalie clarify? Are they not meant to be here, Natalie?
Right, Chair, just to clarify, there are no representations from the police, no representations from the licensing authority, and
Yeah, that was clear, but there was meant to be a representation from environmental protection.
yes,
Is there?
I think they may have agreed conditions or some of the conditions.
Chair, if you look at page 146 of your
Natalie, Mr. Back, I will call you if I want you to come in. Thank you. Natalie.
Hello, Chair. Yes, I was expecting, is it Adeshola?
Yes.
That's the name that I was expecting the person to be in attendance. So I've not been made aware that any representations have been withdrawn.
Thanks very much for clarifying that. Amanda, did anyone you want to come in?
Yes, Chair, just bear with me. I'm just checking our last updates. Bear with me. So, yeah, okay. Yes, Chair, it does appear that the environmental enforcement and environmental protection were expected, but they're not present. So I think you'd have to go on to other persons then now, Chair, and we'll have to come back to the issue of the environmental points. I'll just double check. I believe that environmental environmental enforcement have withdrawn their objection, but I will double check that for you. If you would like to go on to the other persons in the meantime, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I will do. Can I now move? I know we've got, I'll now go to other persons who have submitted representation. And I've got quite a few names here, but I just want to confirm with Natalie who will be speaking. And if you are here, can you please let me know? I've got Josie Fraser, Richard Martin, Helen Martin, or Charlotte Goodhart, or the Waldron House Resident Association.
Yes, I will speak on behalf of them, Chair.
Thanks very much. Christopher Yakumi, Grace Njaro.
I've had apologies from Grace.
Maureen Vabrikan, Stanislaus Wemberger, Tim Totten, Christina Fosina, Wayne Sen Lim.
Yes, President, and I'll be speaking. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Gerklad Mola.
Not present, Chair.
Peter Harrington and
He won't join, Chair.
okay. Connor Brennan and Katrina Morgan.
They can't join either, Chair.
Chair, there's a statement from Connor that he would like to be read.
Ruth Perryman.
I've received apologies from Ruth.
And David and Maria Arantsasu.
Yeah, I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. So which means we got 4 people speaking. If I'm correct, I'll go over them. I've got representative from the Wardron House Resident Association. That is correct?
Yeah, that's me, Chair.
Okay. I've got Christopher.
I'm the chair of the Resident Association, Chair, and I will be speaking on behalf of the association.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I've got Wei Sen Lim.
Yes, that's me.
I've got Connor Katrina Morgan, who will be speaking as well.
They are the ones that sent a note, Chair, to be read that Natalie has got.
Okay, David and Maria Rath. So that is three actually. So you've got three people. So I will start with probably reading the statement, then come back to the Wardron House resident, then going to Way and David. So the statement, will you like me to do that, or Natalie, will you want to do that?
Hi, Chair. I'm happy to read that. The statement is from Connor. What's his surname?
Brennan.
Brennan, yes. And it reads, I truly believe the later the license Tesco has in the store, the increased likelihood that the current security risks in my block of flats will be exacerbated. I implore the committee to limit license hours and/or require Tesco to take adequate measures, adequate according to residents and the residents' associations, to ensure residents feel safe in their own homes and are not subject to increased criminality. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Now moving on to the representative of the Wardron Tenant and Resident Association.
That's me, Chair.
Thanks, David.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, please go ahead. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm the chair of the Wardron House Resident Association, and I would like to let this panel know that residents have not been consulted at all, either by the council, Anchor Hanover, the management agent, or Tesco until the very last minute when the parties were obliged by law to do so. We asked the committee to reject the application in full, as we strongly feel it will aggravate existing issues faced by Wardron House residents over the last 2 years since we got in relation to crime and disorder, public safety, and public nuisance. The majority of residents are members of the association are either entirely opposed to the presence of a Tesco Express, or would need to see appropriate and tangible measures put in place, clearly defined, and strict parameters regularly monitored. And if these measures are not observed or parameters breached, mandatory enforcement that would ensure that the presence of one would not put residents at risk of encountering further criminal activity or otherwise create adverse living conditions. About 3/4 of the apartments are occupied by more vulnerable members of the population, that is, over 55s with mobility problems, young children, single women, and expecting mothers. So far, when we heard about Tesco's representation, we heard about inwards-looking points, i.e. what is done inside the shop. There has been no consideration offered to what happens outside of the shop, and the shop is, let's remember, on the basement of Wardron House. With regards to the opening hours that it was mentioned, none of the 10 shops in the nearby area within a mile round radius opens before 7 a.m. So as the councillor said, it would be really appreciated that the shop reduces their opening hours. And actually, in actual fact, we ran a survey with the residents. An overwhelming majority would actually like the shop to open later and to close earlier than requested. When it comes to security, there's been numerous incidents over the last 2 years. We've recorded 65, out of which a large number have been reported to PC Atkins, leading the Clissold policing team. We are very concerned with the presence of Tesco Express, as it would encourage and enable the existing perpetrators who have already targeted Wardron House to either loiter outside the building more often and at odd times of the day, camouflaging themselves amongst the patrons at the Tesco. It would also create further opportunities for a new, wider group of potential perpetrators to target the building. A positive impact that Tesco could have, if it's to open and the license granted, is by offering to collect any parcels addressed to Wardron House residents, so they don't feel the need to come into the building to steal them. The sale of alcohol from 6 a.m. or whatever opening hours in the same building where we're having all these problems would not be helpful to the situation. It would actually worsen and make this a place where there's a lot more crime and a lot more antisocial behavior. We're really concerned about the amount of noise with the proposed delivery schedule and the delivery mechanism that Tesco plans to employ, rolling all the cages and taking the waste through and across the square, as opposed to using the purpose-built loading area on Spencer Grove. We're further concerned about the light pollution that the shop will create and how much light we already have on the square. With the additional 24/7 lighting from Tesco would make it even worse for the residents in the area. When it comes to waste collection and square cleanliness, we understand that Tesco is going to pay their rates, but that isn't enough. There is no clear pattern as to how we're going to ensure.
30 seconds for please.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to ensure that that is not the case. In addition, we're going to see a worsening of the air quality because of the increased traffic and the engines left running. We already have a test with the school delivery that parks on Cowper Road. And it's likely to attract homelessness, where they will look shelter around the louvers and beg around the shop. So we would, to conclude, we would like this committee to reject the request for the license, the alcohol license to be refused, an agreement from Tesco to reduce the opening hours, ensuring that delivery is not at any sort of unsocial areas and the noise is completely mitigated. We want this committee to put the proactive measures in place at the right at the outset, so that we don't have to engage in a similar situation like the previous licensing discussion. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Can I go to Wayne St. Lin, please?
Hi, thank you very much, Chair. I'm a resident in Warren House. I live by myself. And since the 2 years of moving in, as David, our chair of the association has mentioned, there have been several security issues and antisocial behavior, which I believe was provided in the submissions. It just wasn't published, I think, in the Excel spreadsheet because of sensitivity issues. But there have been numerous issues, and that causes us to feel concerned about our safety, especially with a Tesco downstairs opening for such long hours. We are afraid that would encourage people to loiter around the main gate, main entrance, and to then tailgate to come into the building, and who knows what they'll do within the building then. We appreciate what Mr. Brock has said about Tesco employing security guards and having CCTV. However, they did make clear in our discussion with them, between the residents and Tesco, that they can only they're basically only responsible for their internal premises and not anywhere external. We are right next to them. And on top of that, there is a massive courtyard, which is a privately owned public space. And we are completely happy to have that public space. However, we just need to be mindful of what the sale of alcohol could do to encourage people to drink or loiter in that area even more than they should. We are aware that there are many Tesco's in the area that open from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. However, I would submit anyway on my behalf, and I think a lot of my fellow residents also agree, that we need to take into account, again, special considerations about this area, given the pre-existing security issues that I've already mentioned and antisocial behavior, and also the fact that there is a massive courtyard with many benches for people to loiter around. That probably is not much of a consideration for other Tesco units where that isn't possible. For example, if it's only a small sidewalk, then people can't really just hang out in that space. But this is a very tempting area. We see that in Gillette Square, just down the road. Many people loiter around there and drink and talk to all hours of the morning. We would just be very concerned that that sort of behavior would be encouraged here, again, due to the special circumstances of the location. We're also concerned about public nuisance in relation to not just people buying alcohol and then sitting in the square, but also things like loading and unloading. We did have the discussion with Tesco, and they did tell us basically that they would have to load from Cowper Road and basically bring things all across the square due to that side of the road only being level. However, that means that they'll be rattling trolleys and cages across quite a significant space. And we do have many residents who have young children and babies who live in the area. And because of the location of the square, noise does tend to bounce off. So things that happen in the square can be heard from like the 4th floor, 5th floor, 6th floor. That would definitely disrupt residents from sleeping. Oh, and definitely little children and babies from sleeping. Yeah, I believe that probably is everything that I have to say in this matter. And I would urge the councillors to reject this application. Again, as David mentioned, we are aware that nothing has happened yet, but well, in a sense that compared to the previous licensing, where they had a lot more issues. Here we just want to preempt things because there is a pattern already of people coming and breaking into the building in order to drink and smoke weed in our building. And we are very concerned that this is just going to exacerbate that. And we don't want things to get worse before, we don't want things to have to get worse before action actually takes place. We'd rather just nip it in the bud right now. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Before I move on to David, sorry, I just noticed on my list I've got Gabriela Lacassi and I've got David Senan and Ruth Sadinha. Are they here?
I am here, yes. I'm Gabriela.
Sorry?
I'm
Who's that?
Gabriela. I am here. I'm a
Oh.
resident of Warren House.
Okay, sorry, I didn't call you earlier on, but I do have your name on the list.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can I now move to David?
Thank you,
Sorry.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. I was trying to unmute. I'm on the phone, so it's a bit harder than on the computer. Apologies for that.
So sorry, David. Can I understand you are the same David that I've spoken?
Yes, but if you would allow me a couple of minutes, I would like to make a couple of points on a personal basis rather than
David,
the Chair.
I'm afraid when we get to the discussion stages, I'll call on you if you want to make any point, but I'm afraid not at this stage.
Thank you, Chair.
You. Don't worry. Can I now go to Gabriela then?
Yes, I will just make a few points, as I think both of the residents, David and Sen, Jen, have made that really well. One of my main considerations, I'm also the secretary of the Residents Association, so I fully support what David had just said. But as a personal note, one of the things I've noted a lot around Tesco's operations in the area is the very unsightly cages, which they leave outside of all of their Tesco's at all hours of the day, blocking the pavements, blocking access, making it very difficult to walk for people with trolleys, for people with dogs, for people walking the pavement. Is very noticeable in Green Lanes Tesco's, which they're sitting outside at all times. I'm very concerned that this will be the case in our Tesco's, especially because they have the area and they have made clear that they're planning on loading and unloading through the front entrance. It implies to me that they will be leaving those really unsightly cages outside of the Tesco's at all front, looking onto the street, making our building not just very uncomfortable to walk around and limiting the access, but also very unsightly. And Tesco, in the conversations we've had with them, has not clarified that they will not be leaving those cages out the front. Also, as well, we'll add, preempting maybe something that they would say, every other Tesco I have seen in the area, and we have documented and taken evidence through pictures, leaves those cages at all times, even though they might say they're only there during the times of loading and unloading. That is actually not true. They are left there on a regular basis, and I urge you all to think about the Tesco's in your area and remind yourselves that they always have cages outside. And I think that will be an addition to all the points around security and the fact that it's going to make it much more easy to loiter in the area. It's just going to make the square outside of our home feel a lot more insecure, a lot more unsightly, a lot more dirty, etc. And we would just urge Tesco to tell us what it is that they're planning on doing within this application to minimize all of the risk and impact to the residents, which will live just above it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gabriela. That was very brief. Sorry, Amanda, I saw your hand up. Sorry, Amanda is our legal officer.
Yes,
thank
you, Chair. I've got a couple of points to make. Firstly, just to clarify for your benefit, is that the environmental enforcement have withdrawn their objection, so that's why they're not attending. The environmental protection officer isn't in attendance, but they did submit 3 conditions, which are on the report in the list of conditions, and they are conditions 10, 11, and 12. However, conditions 10 and 11 are not relevant to this application because it refers to on sales, not off sales. And therefore, we would only be looking to ask the applicant, Tesco's, if they would agree to condition 12 remaining on the license, because that would be the only environmental protection condition now that would apply to the application. And so then moving on to my next point is just for clarification of the other persons, Chair, I think we need to remind parties that this is an application for off sales and not for the consideration as to whether or not Tesco's should be on site there at the actual premises. That's not a consideration for the licensing subcommittee. So as I say, I just refer all parties back to the application, which says that the application is to authorise the supply of alcohol for consumption off the premises, and not about the issues relating to whether Tesco's is positioned there and what the issues are relating to their operation. I hope that assists you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just to make, I think, picking on that, Amanda, with Gabriela around operations of Tesco, just to make that clear that we tonight you are before the licensing committee, and what we are here is this license is in regards to sales of alcohol within this Tesco. I'm unsure the Warren, so I see Warren Association, the tenants there, or we might, the solicitor for Tesco might be able to clarify that. Obviously, there's been an arrangement and that space have already been granted to Tesco. So what we are here to, the application before us, what we are looking at is the grant of this application for off sales. It's around alcohol permission, if that makes sense. Thanks very much. I can see the Torija on hands on.
Yeah, hello. My name is Amilcar. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, can I ask you? I don't have. Normally, when we are here, we call people that are listed to speak. I don't have, unless you've got another name.
Yeah, that was sorry to interrupt. That was actually the first thing I wanted to say. Like, I got the invitation because I sent the email and the request, and I got the invitation but for whatever reason, my name is not there. But I did the whole process, and I have the email and the invitation to the meeting.
Sorry, Chair. I would like to confirm. Yes, 8 Torijo. Their representation is C22. I can confirm it. They're one of the other persons.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was C22, but C22 have TBC. So
yes, Chair, because it took a while to clarify
who is coming. Okay.
8 Torijo is C22.
Okay,
thank you.
That clarified it. Over to you, please.
Thank you. I'll try to be concise. So just as a first thing, we oppose completely to the license of alcohol selling at Tesco for all the reasons that all our like David and Gabriela and other residents have mentioned already. But I think there's one important thing, or a couple of things, that we want to mention. The first one is that Tesco, in this meeting that we had with them, they were very clear that they were not going to worry and take care about any people after they leave the premises. And actually, that is one of the main problems about this license, and the reasons why we're against it. As Sen was mentioning, we like the square that is facing most of the flats of the building are just it's a place that invites to stay, and we have a history of big problems and people loitering around, like with a lot of criminality. So we urge you to cancel it, like to approve this license. And if you see around the different Tesco's in the area, even though that they say that they train their employees to take care about who they are selling the alcohol to and so on, it's quite the opposite. You can just walk around different Tesco's and you can see, at least on at Hackney area, and you can see a lot of people that they are just drinking outside Tesco, and there's literally no control whatsoever about that. So we are very worried about that. Especially because most of us, we have families, we have little children, and that is definitely not helping. So yeah, is there anything that you would like to mention?
I can't.
Yeah. Okay, so pretty much that's it. I mean, of course, we would like to discuss other things, but Chair, you mentioned that we just need to restrain to the alcohol license. So
thanks very much, and thanks for being concise. That is, as far as I'm aware, those are the names from my list that's confirmed. So now move.
Chair.
Who is Marco? Sorry, what?
You're on mute, Marco. You're on mute.
Okay. So, sorry, Marco, do you want to come in? I don't have your name listed.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
I can hear you. What is?
I'm on the request C12. I think that's also caused a bit of delay in come through. I mean, I don't want to comment anything. I think.
Marco.
Yeah.
And Laura. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
correct. Sorry, I didn't mention before. Yeah, I think all my co-resident already covered all the points. I think that, yeah, as said before, the concern is the selling of alcohol and, you know, sort of the risk of boosting the antisocial behavior in the square. I live literally above the area in the square, so it will affect really. And I mean, I witnessed already in the past people stealing bikes in the square. So yeah, that's a concern for all the residents. I don't keep it short because, yeah, the thing's already been expressed. So thank you for your time, Chair.
Thanks. Thanks very much for your.
Excuse me, Chair, for interrupting. One of the other residents that you mentioned before, Maureen, has just been able to join us after they've gone. So Maureen is Stan's partner, and Stan previously said they needed to go and pick up their child from nurseries. Maureen is with us now, Chair.
Hi, may I intervene?
Hi, Maureen. Do you
Hello.
want to make your point, please?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. We have a 6-month-old baby, and we've felt unsafe many times before in the building with tailgating and just general antisocial behavior. And I'm very concerned about Tesco opening and increasing that risk for myself and my baby and all the other mothers in the building who have children as well. That's all.
Thanks very much for coming in. I think that is the end of it. I think we've now gone through all the other persons. We've now get to the discussion stages. Residents at this point, some of us might put questions to you as well as to the applicant, just to clarify the issues at this point. And I've got my colleague, Councillor Smith and Councillor Muema, but can I just start to clarify that from Mr. Bach or any of the representative from Tesco in terms of just a clarification, ownership of this space? Can you please confirm the owner of this space? I know the building before the redevelopment, just to be sure whether it's who the owners are at this point. And one of the objectors raised the issue in the front space, and confirm as well whether the front space is public space or Tesco space, as indicated by one of the objectors. And I'll bring my colleagues in too. Thank you.
So, Chair, I'm not entirely sure which space you're talking about, but in terms of the demise that Tesco has under its lease, it will be the building and the building line and the area immediately in front of the entrance. So there'll be a little bit of frontage that goes on there. But be under no illusions, Tesco does not own the square, Tesco does not own the pavements, etc. That will not be changing, etc. So any suggestion that somehow we are responsible for those areas and haven't been maintaining them or keeping them is simply not correct. And that is entirely in line with any ordinary retail operation, be it a Tesco, be it any other form of shop, etc. You would normally expect them to have effectively the demise up to their building line and the area that's normally shaped with a form of changing flooring immediately outside it as well. But beyond that, it would not be our ownership.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Muema Smith, do you want to come in or do I get on to my in terms of ASB, or just want to clarify the environmental protection? You said our legal officer saying the conditions 10 and 11 or put forward by the environmental protection are irrelevant to this application, but the condition 12 stays or is still there. So if we are mindful to grant this application, can I confirm with you, Mr. Bach, whether that condition or whether you'll be happy with that condition? Or Tesco, or your applicant?
So I think in terms of that, that was one of the points of clarification I was hoping to make at the outset, but we had been emailing the individual from Environmental Protection to make the very point that your legal advisor made, that these are off-licensed premises, not on-licensed premises. And so we entirely agree. We would be content, to the extent that you think it is necessary to impose it, for condition 12 to be imposed. Just for the point of clarification, as it might assist a question later, if you then look at conditions 13 to 18, they are now replaced by the email that I think Natalie mentioned from Janssen Brewing, which is the reason why they have withdrawn. So 13 to 18 are no longer relevant. There are the separate conditions in the email with the papers that Natalie referred to at the outset.
Thanks for that. As I mentioned at the onset, this is why I said there will be opportunity at this point to make all those clarifications, that it doesn't have to come at the onset. Amanda, do you want to come in before I bring Councillor Muema in?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, Chair, for you to ask for clarification as to whether or not the applicant, Tesco, are considering the hours as set out in LP4.
So again, I think as we tried to set out in our presentation within the limited time, we have considered the policy, and in response to the question from Councillor Smith, we looked at that very, very carefully. We have amended the hours to 11 o'clock in the evening. LP4 is obviously a consideration, as is paragraph 10.15 of the government guidance. The lack of objections from the statutory authorities who would normally object on hours, being the police and or environmental health, again supported us in our view, that the hours we are now pursuing from 6 in the morning to 11 PM are the appropriate ones to do so, and we believe we can fully promote the lighting objectives, and there is no evidence that we cannot do that. The further point that I would make in relation to this is, as I mentioned at the outset, paragraph 9.12 of the government guidance makes it clear that the police are the experts in relation to the licensee objective crime disorder. Environmental health are similarly in relation to public nuisance, and their view is to be preferred. And a lack of objection from them is evidence you are not only entitled to take account of, but we would say you should. And I can refer you to the case law on that if you require it.
Chair, I did actually hear all of that earlier, which Mr. Bark actually made. So that was totally taken into consideration. But following the representations that have been made this afternoon by the local residents about shops not opening before 7 AM in the morning, have they considered that position?
We have considered that position. I took instructions whilst that was being said, and in relation to this, we are content to keep our current hours of operation. Clearly, it's a matter for you as a committee, if you're minded to grant as to what hours you would do so. What I would say, and I said that I'd come back in the discussions on this, the reason why we have those hours is because this is a convenience store aimed at those living or working in the area. The percentage of sales of alcohol between the hours of 6 AM and 7 PM is less than 0.05% in those stores that have a license to sell. So this is about convenience for legitimate customers who would otherwise, during the hours that the residents might be happy with, be perfectly entitled to purchase alcohol. And so it's about that convenience element, which particularly in London, it is something that is seen to be important. Given the extensive policies, which I'm happy to explain to you if you have further questions, which all the statutory authorities fully understand, we don't believe that any of the concerns of the residents are going to be materialised in this particular case. A lot of them have expressed things as being fears or concerns, or there is a risk. And I agree with all of that. They are fears and concerns. We are not open. We simply cannot have contributed to those issues. What you have not heard a single bit of is that from any of our other stores in relation to the sale of alcohol, that they in any way, shape or form contribute to the issues, or that they exacerbate the problems. And I've been through all the representations, and that can't suddenly be summoned. And equally, that clearly is the view of the police and environmental health. Otherwise, they would be objecting. And you know, as an experience committee, that in cases where they have concerns, they do object. And they simply are not in this case. So there is no evidence whatsoever that any of those problems will be exacerbated. I can come on to what was said at the meeting, but I think what's being relayed is not quite what Tesco's recollection was of that. We actually said that some of the steps that we have in place in relation to security would no doubt mitigate some of the impact, but we were quite clear that we were not the police. And we
Thanks very much, Mr. Back. I need to bring my colleagues in, and if they have further questions around that, you'll be asked. Councillor Muema. Sorry, I'll call you David. Councillor Muema.
Yeah. So I just felt that basically you're not willing to consider reducing the hours. And just to reiterate what Councillor Fajana Thomas said, this is because residents have a different perspective to you. That's why we're doing this. But I just wanted to say to you, well, to ask, in the bundle of papers, there are some people who specified alternative hours, C3, C6, and C14 in particular. And I think the Residents Association, there are 28 properties in your building, is that correct?
There are 73 flats, Councillor.
Yeah. So I just, whilst I take on board that you are legally within your rights to stick to 6 o'clock, given the concerns that people have, and the move at the top is really welcome to move it to 11 o'clock, but a move around from 6 o'clock to a different time, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, to reduce the likelihood of people buying alcohol and drinking it in that area, I think would be really welcome. But I actually wanted to ask you, are you is Tesco a tenant, or do you have a freeholder of your store?
So let me deal with those two questions in turn. So I'll deal with the last one first. That's quickest. We're not.
Well, there's a follow-on, so just need to know if you are.
We're not
Yes.
freehold tenant.
You're a tenant, and so presumably as a tenant of the store, of that space, are there responsibilities on you as a tenant to around the upkeep of the building and of the space that you are in, and as alongside residential tenants and leaseholders, about contributing towards cleaning and so on of the public spaces?
So I can't go necessarily into the level of detail you want, because I haven't specifically looked at this lease, because that hasn't come. But what I can say is there is a lease in place, and that lease will have obligations. If it's in line with an ordinary lease, then there will be certain obligations on us as tenants' covenants in relation to maintenance, repair, not contributing to problems, etc. So the typical things that you would expect, without being able to go into reams and reams of detail, will be there.
Okay.
What we also made clear in relation to that, was trying to say in terms of the presentation, but we also tried to make clear to the residents, is we are very proactive in terms of making sure that we clean not only within our premises, but without our premises. There'll be 2 bins outside. We have cleaners on a daily basis who not only clean our store, but will also clean the frontage to it as well.
Okay. So no, that's very helpful. The reason I ask is because I would on so there's a couple of photos and some CGIs, page 201 and 202, and you residents are concerned about responsibility and financial responsibility for cleaning. I was unclear about if you were loading in a different part of the building, whether that would be you'd be using the space that Jen Lim described as the publicly accessible private space, which the residents pay for. Do you pay for that as well if you're unloading across that space, or do you maintain that?
You probably need to clarify that in relation to.
So on page 2, right, on page 201 and 202, 201 shows the CGIs of your building, the residence entrance and the proposed entrance. And then page 202 shows what looks like the rear, your commercial bin stores. So presumably you'd be responsible for those. My question is around litter and ASB and how you'd manage the space so that residents aren't negatively impacted or picking up the tab through their service charges if there's additional cleaning caused from Tesco. And so I just want to understand the logistics of how that would work in terms, because you said you have a responsible delivery plan, but where is that going to happen just physically?
So let me try and unpack that, and I just have a little bit more clarification as well from Lee Coveney, who's the area manager. So he may want to speak in a moment to add a little bit of context to this. So our lease is from Hackney Council, so I think Hackney are the ultimate freeholder for the whole building.
Right.
I think there is then a sublease to Anchor Housing, and then the residents within Walrond House all have agreements, be they leases or ASTs or whatever they are, with Anchor House. So that's the arrangement.
That's correct, Jared. That's correct, Mr. Buck. That's right.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we will all have our own separate obligations. My understanding, but Lee will clarify this, is we don't share the litter arrangements or the bin refuse with the residents. We have our own separate arrangement, and we will have our own separate service charges, etc. In relation to those outside spaces, I think they are public spaces, etc. But Lee may be able to clarify. What we will be doing is this particular site has very good back of house spacing. You can see that in the layout drawings within the committee papers, which I think appear at about page 140. 145. So you can have a look at that if you want to. So what that means is that we did a delivery assessment which involved someone from Highways, from Hackney Council, I believe someone from TfL. I'm just going to try and move the camera because the sun is coming through the window, so I don't end up blinding you all. In relation to that, that didn't really help. And so after I've answered this question, I'll shut the blind so it'll be more helpful. So what will happen is that a vehicle will arrive into Cowper Road, but about 5-10 minutes beforehand, there will be a message by radio to the store. So they will get all the cages ready so that effectively as cages come off the lorry, the other cages will go back onto it. All of the cages have got acoustic attenuation. The vehicle itself does. It doesn't have an electric motor, it has a hydraulic motor.
Can I just really quickly interrupt you? I feel like my question is a lot more basic than the answer that you're giving. In the space that was described by the residents, it's publicly accessible, but it's paid for via service charge. 3 people in the bundle have referred to that. Are you loading or unloading? If you're looking at alternative ways to mitigate noise, but are you using that space, which is publicly accessible, but is actually belongs to the residents?
So I will get Lee to come in on that, but my understanding is we won't be using that space. But Lee, I don't know what you comment on that.
Apologies, Mr. Buck. That's not correct. I'll let Lee come in.
Sorry, sorry. Can I call? Is that Lee? Would that be who is Lee? That would be
the area manager.
Kelvin. Okay. Can I bring you in at this point? Good evening.
Sorry. So look, I've listened quite a bit today, and it does feel that 6 o'clock in the morning is a big sticking point for our residents. So we want to do the right thing. So look, I think we should just move that 6 till 7 and move it till 7 o'clock to make it more palatable, because we want to be a good resident. We want to make sure that we're part of the community. So I'm more than happy to do 7-11 and compromise both our hours at the end of each work start and the end of the day if that's more acceptable. Because like I said, we're going to be together anyway, so let's make it more palatable and let's try and do the best that we possibly can, really. So I'm more than happy to amend that if you are. With regard to the cages, I know it's not part of the licensing application. However, it is one of those frustrating things, particularly with London stores, that space is a premium, whether it's shop floor, whether it's back room, and I understand the frustration of seeing unsightly cages. So this store has been specifically designed so that it's got a huge back room. And looking at the number of cages that we can hold out the back, it should be more than adequate to make sure that we can store empty cages and rubbish cages out in the warehouse, as well as store the goods and the deliveries. I suppose we've learned a lot from the Nuisance Green store that's up the road. It's a hugely busy store. In fact, far too busy. And again, it's got a compromised warehouse. We've taken things out like the bakery just to try and give us more space. So what we're hoping for is, with the stores being 300 meters apart, something like that, that we will quieten down Newington Green, so that will make it more manageable, and again help us manage that kind of unsightly look out the front. But again, with the Matthias Road development, there should be no reason, apart from when we're getting ready for deliveries, for us to wheel the cages outside so that we can get the deliveries turned around as quickly as possible, as Jeremy's already mentioned, so that we don't sort of like have cages out there for a long period of time, but also we don't have a wagon there for a long period. So again, we want to try and turn the wagons around as quickly as possible.
And again, Lee, just very
hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
That is quite helpful at this point for addressing those questions, Mr. Calvin. And it's good that you mentioned the Newton Green store, because it is a store that I know very well, and I know anyone is like a quarter of a mile away from this this premises or new application we're looking at. And when people look at the management, in particular around delivery and the crates, probably that was the photo in this application might be from there. So it is good that you were aware of that. And I'm sure what residents are saying is seeing a similar issue with their premises, but clarification that there is a separate or loading and offloading space is not going to be the front space where the resident entrance. And again, pick on the instead of, though the LP4 were meant to be 8 a.m., but a compromise of 7 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. It is something. I know some residents have their hands up, and I want to come back to them. Then I'll bring Councillor Smith in. I'll call David, and I know Sen has got her hand up as well. So David and Sen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I wanted to cover a few of the points that Mr. Bark said earlier, and also thank Mr. Coveney for that compromise in the opening hours. That's much appreciated. We also appreciated actually that Tesco agreed to meet the residents last week. It was helpful, I think, for both parties. It felt a bit of a preparation for this discussion, and we definitely welcome what was mentioned then around regular meetings to discuss with them. I think one thing for this forum that would be worth considering for the lease is how will we ensure all parties that all of the things that we have discussed and the concerns that have been expressed and the mitigations that apparently are going to be put in place are actually working, and that we review that things are working, and that we ensure, as you well know, Chair, that there is not a negative impact in the vicinity. I would like to talk about facts, because Mr. Bach was actually discussing about emotions. So let me go through some facts. PC Atkins, who is the lead of the Kilsall policing team, has been for 7 weeks away.
Sorry, David, at this point, all I want is things that are relevant to this application and what we are saying. We don't have
getting there.
the
I'm getting
time.
there. I'm getting there, Chair. I'm getting there very quickly. So I think there is one concern there, which is possibly actually the policing team has not presented any allegation because they've not been around. In fact, actually, Chair, they have a fob to our building so that they can come and do regular patrols, given all the issues that have experiencing. And as you can see in the Appendix A of the Warren House Association submission, we have submitted a record of 65 incidents in the area, right? So this is not about, I have a 7-year-old, Chair, that is afraid as soon as we get to the square if we see people around the area on the square. And that is because I have been with her and we've had 2 direct confrontations and issues with people. Yeah, and she's only 7. She's scared. Okay, that is one thing that will be
Sorry,
exacerbated
David, can I come in on that? It is not, when we are talking about policing objecting, is not your safer neighborhood team that object to licensing application. There is a licensing, police licensing team.
Understood.
So every application goes to them. They are the police that object to application, not the safer neighborhood team. So when Mr. Bach is talking that the police has not objected to this application, sorry, David, he's referring to those team, not your safer neighborhood team.
Thank you for the clarification. That is my lack of understanding. Thank you for that. But let me relate, as I was trying to do, the concern that we do have, because in this call you actually have a couple of families with babies and a number of others with young children. The sale of alcohol will enhance those issues, whether it's early in the morning or late at night. We have, and this is a fact for this forum, the residents paid for the 2 benches on the square to be moved away from the front door to the right to the side of the road, and those are right now next to the door, the area where Tesco is going to have their door, which will mean that anyone buying alcohol, and Tesco has clearly confirmed that they can take care who they sell alcohol to once they're in the store, but that they are not planning to take care of what they do with alcohol as soon as they walk out, which is actually one of the conditions that the environmental health officers laid out in the email that we have also received, that Tesco needs to ensure that people buying alcohol, when they walk out, do not cause any nuisance and do not loiter around in the square. So that is a big concern, Chair, that residents have got, as there's a number of ladies in the building that come out late or leave early in the morning, a number of them with babies, and actually some of them have been directly confronted and challenged by people in the area. So that was to the point of the alcohol. The second point that I want this forum to be very clear about is Tesco explained to us that their plan for delivery is actually not to use the purpose-built loading area on Spencer Grove on the side of the building. They actually plan to back into Spencer Grove in Cooper Road, where they actually will be forced, even though Mr. Coveney has explained they will have their the waste ready, but they will have to actually roll their carts across the entire square. That is around 50 meters on a cobbled square. That will make a lot of noise if anyone knows how those carts run, and you know that will actually create a lot of noise for more than a third or 40% of the flats, because they face the area. So I think that is another thing that this committee should consider. In addition, they've Tesco, as they said, they've created the layout for the shop in a way.
Sorry, David, you want to round up? These are the things you meant to have brought up in your objection.
No,
at
I'm
the
actually responding to
beginning.
the points. No, I'm actually responding to the points that Mr.
So-
Black laid out for the last 20 minutes. I'm just actually trying to respond to each of them. I've been patiently waiting
David, I
so that
will
we could
ask you
respond.
to please round up. I want to move to your other
Thank you. I will do.
resident.
I will
Thank
do.
you.
Indeed, I will do.
You
So
got
as I was,
1 minute to please round up. Thank
sure,
you,
I will
David.
do. I will do. So just to sum up, we've talked about why there is such a strong concern given the experience of the Warren House residents with all the issues we've experienced to date, documented and reported to police. Secondly, we've talked about we have been not being consulted at all around the deliveries, including alcohol, and how they're going to be done. We are really concerned about people loitering in the square, sitting on the benches, drinking that alcohol, and nothing being done about it, and the increasing crime. Those are the big concerns that we have, Chair. Thank you very much for the time.
Thanks very much. At this point, I might want to bring our legal officers in just to clarify, David, to you that this application is for off sale. So whatever happens on the pavement, the benches you are looking at, they're not our benches, or they're not Tesco benches. So I don't think Tesco would be responsible if people are sitting on those benches. Amanda, do you want to come in around this place? Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Chair, I agree with you that we can't put responsibility on Tesco to deal with any issues outside of their store unless it's actually part of their land. So we are restricted in that way, that once they've purchased the alcohol, the customers, and they leave the premises, Tesco can't be responsible for what happens thereafter, unfortunately, because it is off sales. It's not part of the premises, and it's not an on sales matter.
If I may ask, sorry, who would be then, just for listeners for us to know, who would we then be able to raise any concerns with and any sort of issues raised out of the sale of the alcohol?
If any issues arise, firstly, I would definitely raise them with Tesco themselves to make them aware that there are concerns in the area or immediately outside the premises, you know, just in case they can assist in any way. And then secondly, the licensing authority, you'd need to inform them about it. I think that's the main points.
Thank you, that's helpful.
To go for. And then if there is any issues, you know, hopefully they can follow it up, or they can make sure a department who can assist further will be able to assist you. But yeah, so I think that's the main way forward. Chair, all I wanted to ask is, in terms of the hours, would the applicant, through the chair, be willing to consider the hours of LP4 from 8 to 11, because that would be probably a bigger you know, reduction in the hours, and also it would really prevent early hours drinking in the early hours of the morning, or any concerns about antisocial behaviour at that time of the morning. I'm not sure that they did say that there's a low percentage of alcohol sales during the day, so therefore I don't think, Chair, subject to what the applicant says, that it would be unreasonable just to reduce it slightly further to make it more reasonable and less of a worry, given that there are lots of families and children in the area. So I'll leave it to your discretion, Chair. Thank you.
Do you want me to come back on that in terms of whether we'd be prepared to reduce further?
Yes, if you could.
Oh, sorry, I forgot there was one last point I wanted, Chair, if you could clarify, just for confirmation, so we have it for the record, that the late night refreshment is now removed from the application.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're not.
Mr. Back, when you responding, can you respond to those two, the LP 4 hours, 8 to 11, and the removal of late night refreshments? Thank you.
Will do. So in terms of late night refreshment, yes, that is removed. It was only for a coffee machine anyway. There's a peculiar technical reason, which I won't need to bore you with now. In terms of the hours, we were content that 6 to 11 would not cause any problems. And I'll come on to why in a moment and pick up on some of the points that David responded to, and actually what I was saying rather than what was being inferred that I was saying. We've amended till 7 to 11, not because we think there will be any problems between 6 and 7 in the morning, but as a concession to the residents in terms of what they're saying, because we want to get along with them. Clearly, in terms of LP7, it's a policy requirement. It is not mandatory, as I've said. We would require, in terms of that, to be firm evidence that the fears that the residents have raised, that there are existing problems, and I accept that there are existing problems, will be exacerbated by Tesco. And there is no evidence as to that. And there is actually a lot of evidence from the statutory authorities and their lack of objection and some of the other things that we've done, that that won't be the case. So I think in terms of a compromise, 7 to 11 is an incredibly fair one on the basis that we have done this from our perspective. And I can see people shaking their head, but we're explaining what our position is.
Thanks for that clarification. That is what I want at this point.
One point I do need to make, which is in response to what Mr. Muniz said, and I think it's important. The point we were saying in relation to the problems that the residents are fearful of is, clearly they have issues at the moment. We have not said that there are no issues at all. The important point that we are making is that we do not believe that the operation of a Tesco is inconsistent alongside the residents. And we further do not believe that our operations will in any way exacerbate that. In fact, we actually think there may be a mitigating effect by virtue of the fact that we are present there. We might have a deterrent effect. We have a responsible retailing of alcohol policy. If we saw people who came and bought alcohol and then were trying to consume it and loiter in the area, we would raise that with them, either via our security guards, we either wouldn't sell them again, we could ban them, etc. There was a further thing that we mentioned to the residents, and again, I'm going to mention briefly now, so I think it's important. We also have area security teams. So if the store felt there was a need to call in them from the local area, we could get someone in a high-vis jacket to stand outside the store or in the immediate area. They couldn't intervene or they couldn't arrest people because we don't have those powers. But again, it provides a huge deterrent effect in terms of that. Tesco, if you were to look at their incident logs with the police, probably have one of the highest numbers in terms of records and reports, not because we create incidents, but because Tesco will be used as a locator. And it's where the duty manager or where we have security will call the police frequently and regularly and say, it's not an issue with our store, we haven't got a problem here, but there are issues.
Sorry, Mr. Back, I really need to move on. Thanks for those clarifications. I need to bring some.
I just came up with one other point I needed to, for you to pass to Mr. Barker to ask for his comment on, is would the applicant consider a condition for regular either monthly or quarterly meetings with the local residents?
Thanks very much. That is actually one of the things that I put down to ask, but I will ask that because of I listened to Mr. Covenant saying that he wants to be there, don't want to curate, they want to be part of that community, and being part of that community would be useful. For instance, if there are issues residents want to raise, so they have that communication, they know either on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, they will have a resident Tesco meeting where they can sort out issues or raise issues. Would that be something, a condition that you would be happy to accept? Do you want to come in,
Yeah,
Mr.
sure.
Covenant?
Yeah, no problems.
Can I just do that quickly first? So I think before Lee comes in, as a good neighbour, we are willing to speak to all residents at all times. And it's part of what we do.
Mr. Back, with the condition we just proposed, can you respond to that without going further?
But it's more nuanced than that, and therefore this is quite important. So
I don't want the nuance, Mr. Back. Can you answer whether we
I will answer. I need to give you the nuance, and I think the nuance is important, and it's important that we are able to get this across. So as a company, we liaise with residents all around the country, and we are willing to do that here, and we're willing to meet with them regularly. Whether you actually need to condition that is really a matter for you, but where you impose conditions, they end up not being flexible, so over time things may change. and therefore it may be better that we give you our commitment that we are prepared to liaise with the residents regularly via the store manager, via Lee, via Hardy's Purwell, in terms of.
Thanks, Mr. Bach. We would prefer, as the
Lee,
licensing authority, will prefer to put a condition in rather than a commitment. As you said, things might change, but in terms of the condition, we remain on the license. And you were the solicitor today. Tomorrow there might be another solicitor. Yeah, Mr. Covenant is here today. Tomorrow he might not be here. So as if that is acceptable, that is what we are asking. Rather, we would prefer the condition. In fact, before our legal officer prompted me, it's one of the last thing that I want to say. And I'm conscious other residents have been waiting. So probably if you need to liaise with Lee and come back in terms of whether that is acceptable or not, if that is okay, and when we are rounding up, you can come back with an answer for us around that condition. I know Sen Lim, you've been waiting patiently. I'll bring you in and Torija in as well. Thank you. Councillor Smith, you are waiting as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of points of clarification. It might just be my lack of understanding of the licensing regime. However, I think the point here is that Tesco as the applicant needs to demonstrate that the licensing policy objectives are met. And one of them is to make sure that they're not providing an unacceptable contribution of levels of crime and disorder in the locality. So the locality, I submit, will be more than just the Tesco premises. So even though it's an off-license sale of alcohol, the locality, including the courtyard, should be taken into account, which is why we residents have been mentioning that. And that's also another reason why we have been mentioning things to do with operations and cages and everything, because we believe that goes to the public nuisance point in the licensing policy objective. And we just think that no other type of off-license that, well, an ordinary off-license doesn't really get delivery 6 days a week before store opening, that with carts traveling back and forth between like their bedrooms and homes. So just to clarify, I think that's how we as residents interpreted licensing regime, but perhaps if someone would like to clarify that's not the case, then please do. Another question was to do with, we've been referring to LP4. However, there is LP3 as well, which talks about core hours from Monday to Thursday, usually being 8 to 11. I recognize that Friday and Saturday is 8 to midnight. Obviously, residents would prefer for it still to be 8 to 11. And then also shorter hours on Sunday from 10 to 10:30. And I would just like to ask if Tesco would consider doing that. Because again, this is, again, the policy says that it's subject to demonstrating that LP1 and LP2 are met. And we have been trying to show that the issues to do with crime are not indeed met. I take Mr. Barker's point that that police are the experts in relation to public crime. However, I would like to submit that the residents who live in a building every single day, 24/7, are the ones who are experts on what they experience on a daily basis. It might be that perhaps the particular police licensing team do not get all the info. I do know not all residents report everything to the police because it's a matter of time. I myself, once I had an incident where I was exiting and I just saw these 2 youths in balaclavas covered up to their faces in the exit. And one was clearly trying to hide to not be seen. And then another one was just coming up to join him, I think. And as soon as they saw me, they just went, damn, which was a very clear indication of guilt. I was then afraid of like leaving. So I just turned back and went straight back up to the building. I then had to ring the police and I was—
Sorry, do you want to go to your point, please?
Yes. So I was on the phone with the police for about 20 minutes before I could make the report. So I submit that perhaps not all residents make reports because they just don't have the time to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amanda, do you want to say something about those points?
No, I have no further comment on that. I'm happy for you to just wrap up with the comments from the different parties. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Torija, you've got your hands up.
Hi, sorry, I was on silent. Yeah, so basically, I want to reiterate, like, what I hear from Tesco is that they want to listen to the community, because in theory, they are trying to create a positive impact on it. But the reality is, like, even like on this meeting, what you're hearing all the time, like, you're having a lot of residents of the area. You're having the Wallrun Association that we are saying what as residents we would prefer our concerns. And the only thing that we are hearing back is just 1 hour less of the opening hours. Nothing about the alcohol, not hearing about sorry, about our concerns about the alcohol. And again, like you were mentioning before about like, yeah, but the environmental protection team had no objection. And it's true, they had no objection, but at the same time, they asked for specific conditions to be met. And one of those is about taking care that, I'm reading out loud, the premises license holder shall ensure that on leaving the premises, customers will not be permitted thereafter to loiter or congregate outside of the premises. And yet, Mr. Buck continues saying, and even Miss Amanda, you were saying as well, Tesco doesn't need to take care about when the people that have bought alcohol leave the premises. So I think it's in contradictory direction that we are hearing that you're going to take care, like that you really want to have a positive impact on the community, that at the same time you will be listening to the people that will live in the area, and yet you are not listening to all these concerns that we have. And we are saying like, but even the environmental team is saying you should be, if we don't mind if you have that concession, but you at least need to take care of the people when leaving the premises and taking care and not allowing to loiter in the area. And yet you continue saying that you won't be doing it. So I don't see any attitude of meeting a middle point where is like, yeah, we'll take care, and we commit by writing, not just by talking now, but by saying we will be taking care of this and this and that and that. So we honestly, personally, I don't believe there's any will on your end to try to prevent that. Hence why we are more hard in terms of saying we really don't want this license to be approved. Like again, like we have a toddler, as many other residents in the building. We have experienced very, very negative experiences, and don't lie to ourselves. When people get drunk, if there's a pub around like less than 100 meters away from here, when they leave, they come to buy alcohol. I don't think they will be in the best state of mind to just relax and chill and don't disturb at all. I think it will be quite the opposite. And if, as I said previously, if you just go to the Tesco that is in Kingsland Road, you can see people drinking alcohol outside Tesco, and no one says anything. I can show you photos of it. Like we have plenty of evidence of people that are drinking outside Tesco. I don't mind sharing that. I can go any given day and take photos and prove them to you. There's no control whatsoever. So thank you.
For saying that, can I just want to say what we are here, of course, we are here to listen to, it is important to listen to objectors around what they're objecting to, but just to remind you that licensing is about legislation. So the decision we're going to make will be in accordance to what legislation allows us, while we sympathize with residents and residents' issues are important to us. We cannot object solely or refuse an application solely because residents have objected to it. So I think that is important for us to make clear to residents. But what we are looking at is making sure that we are making a decision in accordance with the licensing objectives. So that is important to get clear to residents. So it's not because you are here tonight, because you are here, we need to object to this application before us. So I don't want to give any false hope that because we've got 10 residents here, that means an automatic or refusal of an application. I'll bring Councillor. I'm rounding up at this point. Can I bring Councillor? We've had quite a lot. Residents have had the opportunity. Many of you have spoken twice, 3 times. So I'm going to be rounding up. So I'll go to my colleagues. if they have any point of clarification, either from the applicant or residents who were objecting. Councillor Moema, then Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Super quick, and my question is to Lee Coveney. As the area manager, given that we've got a number of residents here from the Residents Association, some in the bundle from a different Residents Association, would this particular store be willing to make a commitment, and you share the building, to actively participate? Well, I don't want to make it too onerous, but to, for example, engage with the Residents Association, perhaps quarterly. So this is a question for Lee, Mr. Bark, I'm sorry. Just given that it's operational, just given that this in an ideal world, none of these issues come to pass. But if there is, then if they do, then there is a mechanism for residents to have that feedback loop with Tesco so that those problems can be addressed. And it is not to make it onerous, but the condition provides both Tesco and the residents with some protection in case there's an issue in 3-5 years' time.
Simple answer, absolutely.
Okay, good.
Just to clarify, I'm pushing a very experienced store manager into the store. He's run 3 or 4 stores. He's great with customers, really cares about the local community, very good at managing issues that come to his store. So he's very good at dealing with shoplifters, very good at dissuading poor behaviour around. So he's specifically been targeted to put into the store because obviously, look, we're all proud of brand new stores. It's not often we get one. So we want to make sure that we launch it absolutely as well as we possibly can. Not only just for the customers, but for the residents as well, because actually we don't want it to be an eyesore. We don't want it to be a drain on the local spirit. So great store manager, and he is there 6 days a week. He takes great pride in his shop, and he will be always open to the residents. And I will be there a lot of the time, but I'm more than happy to catch up on a quarterly basis and just talk through everything. Look, we're not going to get everything right. We're only human, but we'll do our best to make sure that anything we do, we try and if we do things wrong, we'll try and put them right straight away. So I think I hear a lot of stuff about from the residents, and I totally sympathise with everything. And it sounds like you've had some really poor sort of like people in the area. I really do and we don't want to add to the problem, and we want to help, but we have to be. We're also bound by, we're not policemen and we can't tackle people, but we can phone the police. We have mobile guarding. I think Jeremy's sort of like mentioned about it, and we can just work with you to try and help. We're not street cleaners. We're not policemen. We're not parcel takers in us, but what we can do is work with you, and we'll do our best. Like I said, we're not perfect. We are going to get shoplifters. We are going to get some bits and pieces, but also what you got to remember is 99% of our customers are great people, just like yourselves. And we want to make sure we serve them really well as making sure that the residents like us as well, because we want you to shop with us as well. Okay. So look, yeah, absolutely, more than happy.
Thanks very much for confirming that. Can I go to Councillor Smith finally? Sorry, Mr. Bag, do you want to come in before I bring my colleagues in to?
Thank you, Chair. It's been partly dealt with already in the sense that Mr. Coveney confirmed he's happy to liaise. The condition we were sort of emailing and just sort of suggesting wording so that it was suitably flexible and could take account of things, but a condition along the following lines: the premises licence holder will liaise regularly with residents as required, and where necessary will arrange meetings with the local residents. So I think that gives sufficient clarity.
That's very different to what I'm suggesting. It's really simple. There's no structure in place with the Residents Association. If it's similar to other TRAs, you may meet once a month. All I'm suggesting is for half an hour once every 3 months.
Quarterly. And I think
from the Tesco would
Mr. Coveney agreed to that.
My suggestion, a standard condition for quarterly meetings. Yeah.
We got a standard condition, so that is what we're adding. Thanks
Whilst I
very
understand
much.
your concerns, Mr. Bark, I promise you this solution is much simpler and it's much easier to understand for residents, and there is a level of transparency about it, which that's all. Yeah, and if it can be incorporated, I think that's fine.
Yes,
that's absolutely fine. But what I was trying to say is we would anticipate liaising more frequently than that.
That would be if it's in addition.
We don't want to say monthly in case that's too onerous on you. So quarterly is fair. If you want to do more, you can do more.
You can do more.
Look, as I mentioned, more than happy with it. And I will, if I'm around, absolutely, I'll be attending it, and half an hour over a coffee, more than happy.
Thanks for that. And finally, can I go to Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you. I've been sitting here listening to all of this quite patiently, so I've got some observations that I'd like to make. I mean, obviously, it's welcome that you've moved to 7. I would prefer 8 myself in terms of LP4. You've got a security guard, you say 40 hours a week. It would be good to kind of use them to prevent, well, to sort of make a nod to any loiterers that are hanging around. I see 2 benches in the square. I'd like to know if they're the only ones in the square, or if there are others.
That's only 2. Yeah, that's right.
Only 2. I think so. I think that the key things, there's the antisocial behaviour, and then there's the deliveries. And I am a bit concerned about the deliveries coming across the square, as mentioned in one of the other person's representations. So if we could maybe think about stopping that from happening somehow. I know you've got a big back room. Is there a place somewhere else where you could just drop those off or whatever? Do you have to come across the square? Because that's going to cause problems. So we need to think about how to mitigate against that.
May I come in, Chair, to explain that point?
One second. And so I think, Chair, and also there are other shops in the area that sell alcohol just down the road. I think there's a shop next to Travis Perkins, yeah. So there is alcohol being sold, sort of, in relatively close proximity to Tesco's. So that's going to happen. But then a wider issue really is the ASB. I think 65 incidents recently seems quite a lot to me. So maybe the council, I know it's not licensing, but maybe we could look at. And you mentioned you had more patrols in the area. Maybe the council, we could take a separate issue and get that on the go. And then just lastly, it worries me that people are coming into your building, and I'm thinking, well, what's going on with your doors in that building? Are they, so maybe the doors need fixed or something like that. So these are just like practical observations. Yeah, so I think I'll close there, Chair, because I know we're pressed for time. But those were just some observations and a few questions intermingled.
Chair, can I briefly answer those 2 points?
Thanks. Sorry, I'm afraid those questions are not for you. I don't think you are the applicant. I'm afraid. Sorry, Mr. Gonzalez, can you please? The question my colleagues raised were to the applicant around their delivery. So I think they're the people equipped to answer those questions and not you. Oh, Mr. Back or Mr. Covenant, do you want to come in around the back room delivery, please?
So let me deal with that, and then you can chip in, Lee. But let me deal with that first. So I think, first and foremost, as I said at the outset, over 90% of what this store does is nothing to do with alcohol. And therefore, deliveries have already been dealt with and conditioned as part of the planning process, as I mentioned at the outset. So there is a delivery management plan. There are set hours. Someone from the council, from Highways and TfL has already been and looked at it. The most appropriate place that has been agreed, including as part of the Tesco risk assessment, is within Cowper Road. Now, this is licensing, and the alcohol is a small but important part. If you wanted to condition to mitigate the impact of granting an alcohol license, because most of the deliveries are nothing to do with this, then I would suggest a condition saying that all deliveries of alcohol be incorporated into deliveries of other goods. What I would be very, very wary of doing is suddenly opening up effectively planning issues and transport issues that have already been determined by another committee and having permissions that conflict with each other. But to the extent that anyone is suggesting that somehow the issues of planning is fanciful and hasn't been considered. It has been considered in considerable detail as both part of the planning permission consent and the management plan, and as part of Tesco operations. Tesco have a huge logistics arms where they have dedicated people that actually schedule the deliveries and look at these issues. If there were to be an issue in practice, which we don't think there would be, then it would be something that we could liaise with the residents over. No doubt it could be raised at the quarterly residents meetings, but to suddenly have a separate condition governing non-alcoholic products via licensing, I think would probably, one, be unlawful, certainly wouldn't be proportionate in terms of the government guidance on conditions, and would potentially cut across something which was the right regime for dealing with this, which was planning. But as I say, be under no illusions that this hasn't had already considerable thought, but from those with the expertise in relation to highways, deliveries, those sorts of issues. Lee, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yes, so I mean, at the residents meeting, we had the guy on that actually designed the store and saw all the planning permissions and things like that. So the loading bay at the back is not in our demise, so we're not allowed to use that. So the only place that we can do it is Clubber Road, and then we just take it across, unfortunately. Much as I'd love to deliver at the front door or the back door, and it's very easy, that is the planning permission that we've got, unfortunately. What we will look at is to help make the delivery easier. We're looking at some equipment which is called a master mover, which is it's kind of like a hydraulic kind of like little bit of a machine that helps drag the cages in, which makes it easier to use and safer to use, really. So that's actually been ordered for the store, and will be there before we open.
And again,
is that helpful? Is that helpful?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry, I'm going to round up now. Thanks for clarifying that, and for the benefit of residents, just want to pick on planning that, as Mr. Bach said, this before what we are doing tonight is licensing application to grant these premises to sell alcohol. That is our remit. So the remit of planning that have granted the use of this space for Tesco is not what we are looking at. That is a different regime, as they've said, and have confidence in the council planning. If they've made a decision around the management and delivery and agree that the best place to for the delivery would be to the side of the road, it might be because of highway obstruction. If they're delivering in front, it might be because of other issues that might impact on or public safety. That's why they've made that decision. But that is not a decision for us to make here tonight. Our remit is around licensing of the sales of alcohol within that premises. So on that note, I would thank residents. We've listened to you, we've heard you in terms of your contribution and coming here tonight. The last thing that I want to confirm, Amanda, is the applicant, if we're mindful to grant approve this application, they are happy to put the quarterly meeting with resident with this. They are happy to put the quarterly meeting with resident with this. Is that correct?
I've got a note of that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. And the other thing is around the hours of work. It is the operating hours is they agree 7 to 11. 7 to 11. Just want to clarify that. And the last thing that I want,
they have, I think Mr. Bark did also say it's at the discretion of members, but that's what they've agreed. Yeah.
They've agreed, and members, and we're going to discuss that. And the final thing is agree to condition 12 of the environmental protection. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks. Just want to make that clear.
Yes,
So
Mr. Bark,
thanks.
Mr. Bark has another point.
There are also the 4 extra conditions. So instead of conditions 13 to 18 in your papers, there were 4 extra conditions that
Yes,
Jancy
that's correct. Yes,
just make sure to.
Yeah, that's correct. We know that. It's just I'm only taking those ones because I want to clarify that at the meeting before we go away. So thanks very much for your attendance. And that brings us to the end of this item. I think in the next 3-5 working days, the outcome will be communicated to the applicant and objectors. Thanks for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all. Can I now go to, I've not had any 10s.
No, that's correct, Chair. Yeah, that's correct.
We don't have any 10. So in that case,
you can conclude.
I can conclude this meeting. Can I please ask Mario to stop streaming?